The moment you start seeking fairness, you have already surrendered power. In a world that rewards strategy over sentiment, Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't cruel. He was clear. His rules weren't designed for the faint-hearted. They were built for those tired of being manipulated, overlooked, or outplayed. For 3 relentless hours, we're diving deep into the mind that shaped empires and exposed the brutal truths of human nature. This isn't about playing nice. It's about playing to win. If this is your first time on our channel, hit subscribe and comment which philosopher you want to discover in the next video. In the game of power, visibility is vulnerability. The more people understand your intentions, the more they can sabotage them. That's why Machiavelli's first and perhaps most enduring principle is this: hide your intentions until the moment strikes. Not because secrecy is inherently virtuous, but because transparency gives your enemies a map, and a map gives them time. Power, according to Machiavelli, is rarely seized by brute force alone. It's acquired through maneuvering, through the slow stacking of leverage while others are distracted. To openly state your goals is to hand over your strategy. It invites resistance, breeds envy, and gives adversaries the opportunity to form alliances against you before you've even begun. That's the danger of speaking too soon. Instead, Machiavelli advises you to operate under layers. Let people believe you want something else. Speak the language of peace when you are planning war. Compliment your rival while undermining them quietly. If your target believes they understand you, they stop watching closely, and that's when dominance becomes possible. This tactic is especially important in leadership, whether you're in politics, business, or social. Influence, announcing every move, creates expectations, and expectations create resistance. But if your actions appear reactive rather than proactive, if your goals seem shaped by external events rather than internal ambition, then you rob your opponents of the ability to organize against you. Take historical figures like Julius Caesar, who pretended to be a defender of the Republic while slowly amassing dictatorial power, or, in modern times, corporate leaders who seem to be pivoting based on market needs when in truth they've had a plan all along. Their genius lies in hiding the arc of their ambition until it's too late to stop. Even in personal relationships or career advancement, this principle applies. If you make your aspirations too clear, say gunning openly for a promotion, others may block you not because they dislike you, but because they fear you. But if you appear content, non-threatening even, distracted, people lower their guard. Then, when the opportunity arises, you strike, not out of nowhere, but out of invisibility. Machiavelli also warns against premature celebration. Often we're tempted to share plans before they are real, but every time you reveal your vision before it's fortified, you dilute your own momentum. People critique, they poke holes, they spread your ideas without your control. Worse, they prepare countermeasures, and when the time comes to act, you're already cornered by the very people you thought were indifferent. This rule isn't about lying for the sake of deception. It's about mastering the timing of revelation. Your goals must remain invisible until the moment of execution, when opposition is too stunned or too late to respond. To practice this, Machiavellian thinkers remain 2 steps ahead in planning, 1 step behind in expression. They don't show their hunger, they show poise. Their power is revealed only when it cannot be denied, and by that point, it's no longer a negotiation, it's reality. Love is fragile, fear is reliable. That's the brutal truth Machiavelli handed to those who dared to. Lead. If you must choose between being loved or feared, choose fear, because fear unlike. Love does not waver when pressure comes. Love is conditional. It fades with disappointment. But fear survives disappointment. Fear obeys even when affection breaks. This philosophy doesn't call for cruelty. It calls for strategic emotional leverage. A ruler, boss, or leader who leans too heavily on love and approval will eventually be betrayed by those they tried to please. People turn on the kind leader faster than on the firm one, especially in uncertain times. That's because kindness is interpreted as weakness when resources are scarce or threats arise. But fear demands respect, and respect holds even when circumstances shift. Machiavelli understood that human nature is self-interested. People may praise you, smile at you, and applaud you, but when their interests clash with yours, affection evaporates. A feared leader, however, creates a hesitation. A second thought. If I cross this line, there will be consequences. That hesitation is a tool. It keeps order. It prevents disobedience before it starts. But fear must be managed carefully. Machiavelli was clear. You must avoid being hated. A feared leader who crosses into hatred becomes a target. Hatred is emotional and emotional. Enemies act recklessly. The trick is to instill just enough fear that people respect your boundaries, obey your rules, and remember your power without building the kind of resentment that festers into rebellion. This is the art of calibrated dominance. One way to achieve this balance is through unpredictability. When your punishments are rare, but severe, and your rewards are consistent but impersonal, you remain in control of the emotional climate. People know what's expected, but they also know the cost of violating those expectations. They behave not because they adore you, but because they remember what happened to the last person who underestimated you. This principle also applies to negotiations, partnerships, and even parenting. If you are always trying to be liked, avoiding confrontation, apologizing excessively, yielding ground, you lose leverage. You become predictable, and predictability without strength is an invitation for others to test you. But when people feel the presence of consequences behind your silence, they begin to self-regulate. They start to choose caution over challenge. Machiavelli never said love is useless. In fact, the ideal leader would be both loved and feared. But in a world where that balance is hard to strike, fear is the more reliable tool. Love makes people comfortable. Fear makes them alert. Love creates admiration. Fear enforces discipline. And in moments of crisis, it's discipline that holds the line, not affection. To implement this, don't chase approval. Chase results. Don't soften your stance to keep peace. Harden it to preserve strength. Let your kindness be a surprise, not an expectation. And always remember, when people both love and fear you, they admire you. But when they only love you, they use you. Perception is the true battlefield of power. What people believe about you shapes your destiny, far more than what is objectively true. That's why Machiavelli emphasized one of the most unsettling but effective rules of dominance: control perception. Truth is less important than belief. In politics, leadership, and influence, reality is often irrelevant unless it's seen, felt, or feared. And whoever controls what others see controls how others act. This doesn't mean truth doesn't matter at all. It means it doesn't matter first. In the real world, The masses don't have access to facts. They don't see your intentions, your inner motives, or even your outcomes in full. What they see are symbols, narratives, headlines, facial expressions, and timing. Their conclusions are shaped not by data, but by impression. If you appear confident, even when unsure, people assume you're in control. If you dress like a success, walk like a leader, and speak with clarity, others will treat you with more respect before you've earned it. And that respect often leads to more opportunities, which reinforces the original perception. It becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Meanwhile, someone with more experience. But poor presentation may be ignored simply because they don't look the part. Machiavelli's genius was in recognizing that belief drives behavior. A ruler who appears strong will face less rebellion even if their army is weak. A politician who seems moral will gain support, even if their private actions are corrupt. This is not a call for fraud. It's a recognition of the power of storytelling, presentation, and image management. That's why propaganda works. That's why reputations matter more than resumes. That's why rumors, once they circulate, often have more influence than verified statements. In this environment, those who cling too tightly to just telling the truth without shaping its presentation lose the game before it begins. You must learn not only how to speak the truth, but how to craft the belief around it. Even in business, the companies that control their brand perception win. Apple isn't just selling phones, they're selling identity. Their truth is less important than the belief that owning their product makes you elite, creative, or ahead of the curve. That belief is worth billions. As an individual, you must ask, what do others believe about me? And more importantly, what do I want them to believe? Then act accordingly. If you want to be seen as wise, don't just gain knowledge. Create the rituals and expressions that signal wisdom. If you want to be seen as powerful, move with the calm assurance of someone who doesn't need to prove it. Your posture, tone, presence, and timing matter just as much, if not more, than your content. Belief is sticky. Once someone forms a perception of you, they'll filter every future interaction through that lens. That's why early impressions are critical. Control them, curate them, shape them with intent. Because once a belief hardens into a reputation, it becomes incredibly difficult to undo. In the end, the most dangerous man isn't the one who holds the truth. It's the one who shapes what people think is true. Power is not just about position. It's about leverage. And leverage comes from control over resources, decisions, or knowledge that others need. That's why Machiavelli advised, keep allies dependent on you, not out of malice, but out of survival. Because when your allies no longer need you, they start to evaluate whether they even want you. And often the answer is no. Dependence is the foundation of loyalty. Real loyalty doesn't spring from love, friendship, or past favors. It comes from need. If someone believes they can't succeed, grow, or survive without you, then their loyalty is no longer a choice. It becomes a default. This is how powerful leaders build unbreakable alliances, not by inspiring affection, but by embedding themselves into the very structure of their allies' success. This strategy begins with giving, but not just giving generously. You give strategically. You help your allies in ways that create long-term reliance. That might mean giving them access to networks they wouldn't otherwise have, giving them responsibilities that are tied to your own systems, or positioning yourself as the only one who can solve their most pressing problems. Every gift becomes a tether, Every opportunity becomes a hook. But here's the subtlety. This dependency must feel like empowerment. If it feels like a chain, they'll resist. If it feels like elevation, they'll embrace it. You let your allies think they're rising on, their own, when in truth they're climbing a ladder you built, and only you know how to hold it. Steady. Machiavelli's insight lies in understanding that independence breeds unpredictability. The more self-sufficient an ally becomes, the more they begin to reassess the power dynamics. If they know longer need you, they start to imagine life beyond you. They might start aligning with your rivals, or worse, replacing you. That's why truly dominant players never build a system where others can walk away clean. They create systems where walking away comes with cost, loss, or confusion. In business, this might mean being the gatekeeper to clients, deals, or intellectual property. In leadership, it might mean being the only person who can keep a fractured team in balance. In personal relationships, it might look like being the emotional center others always return to. The goal is the same: reduce their ability to function fully without you. Of course, this strategy must be used with nuance. Overdo it and you appear manipulative. Make it too obvious and you create resentment. That's why the best Machiavellian operators make dependence feel like collaboration. They hide the control inside what looks like mutual success. You also must avoid becoming dependent yourself. If your power rests on a single person or faction, you become vulnerable. So while you build their need for you, never mirror it back. Always remain the sun they orbit, never the planet that needs their gravity. Because when allies become too strong, they become competitors. But when they remain dependent, they become extensions of your will. And in Machiavelli's world, control is not about domination. It's about designing relationships where disloyalty is too costly to consider. Loyalty is rare, fragile, and easily influenced by fear or opportunity. That's why Machiavelli insisted that it must be reinforced with visible consequences, both positive and negative. Reward loyalty publicly, punish betrayal brutally. This principle is not about theatrics. It's about creating a system of psychological reinforcement. People must see the benefits of standing with you and fear the consequences of crossing you. Public reward sends a clear signal: loyalty is profitable. When someone supports you, especially during uncertain or turbulent times, and you elevate them in front of others, you're not just giving them a gift. You're setting an example. You're telling the rest of the room, this is how I treat those who back me. The reward doesn't have to be enormous. It just has to be visible, meaningful, and tied directly to their loyalty. These rewards shape behavior. Others watching will calculate their own positions and lean toward loyalty, not out of virtue, but because they see a clear, repeatable benefit. Machiavelli understood that people are moved more by incentives and fear than by ideals. So the key is to weaponize both. Equally important, if not more, is the punishment of betrayal. When someone turns against you, undermines your leadership, or allies with your rival, the cost must be swift, severe, and unmistakable. It's not about vengeance, it's about deterrence. A soft punishment communicates weakness. It tells your enemies that the risk of betrayal is low. But when the consequences are sharp and public, it sends a warning. If you betray me, you will regret it, and everyone will know why. Machiavellian punishment works best when it's exact and strategic. It must not be chaotic or emotional. It must look like justice. The traitor must be made into an example that echoes through the ranks. Their downfall should carry a story that people whisper, remember what happened to him. Whether it's demotion, exile, or financial ruin, the punishment should stick, not just to the individual, but to the culture around them. But this brutality must be balanced. If you punish too often or without cause, you become feared and hatred breeds rebellion. That's why public reward is equally important. It humanizes your leadership and shows you're not acting out of cruelty, but out of principle. People must believe you're fair even if you're harsh, and the best way to demonstrate fairness is to always reward loyalty with the same clarity and intensity that you punish betrayal. This principle extends to teams, partnerships, politics, and even family. Children, employees, or constituents all learn from what's punished and what's rewarded. If betrayal is quietly ignored, it grows. If loyalty is taken for granted, it fades. But if both are handled with visible consequences, the lines stay clear. In Machiavelli's world, reputation is everything, and reputation is shaped by what others witness. If they see you honor loyalty, they'll lean toward you. If they see you crush betrayal, they'll think twice. And in that space between admiration and fear, you secure your dominance. Mercy is seductive. It makes you feel noble, respected, even admired. But Machiavelli would tell you, use mercy as a calculated delay, not a principle. Mercy, when applied indiscriminately, is not a sign of strength. It's an invitation for defiance. If you make it a habit, it becomes expected. And once people expect your mercy, they start to plan around it. True power lies not in constant cruelty, but in unpredictable control. Mercy in the Machiavellian sense is a tactic, not a virtue. You don't extend it because someone deserves it. You extend it when it benefits you, perhaps to lull your enemy into complacency, to maintain a useful reputation, or to buy time when the cost of conflict is too high. But the key is this: it must be temporary. Consider this: when you punish someone, they remember the pain. But when you show mercy, they remember your weakness. They may thank you publicly. They may appear humbled. But privately, they calculate. They wonder, what else can I get away with? What is his limit? That's the danger of mercy offered as a rule. It erodes deterrence. This doesn't mean you should never show leniency. In fact, when used sparingly, mercy can be a powerful display of control. The most feared leaders are not those who are cruel without reason, but those who could destroy you and choose not to. That kind of restraint, when timed perfectly, creates both gratitude and unease. Your enemies won't know what triggered your leniency, and that uncertainty is a weapon. It makes them cautious, off balance, and dependent on your continued favor. But once mercy becomes routine, you've surrendered control. The moment you let your enemies believe they're safe from consequences, they begin preparing their next move. Mercy must always carry a shadow of threat. It should feel like a temporary ceasefire, not a permanent policy. Even in leadership or personal relationships, this rule applies. If someone wrongs you and you forgive too easily, they may see it as softness. If a team underperforms and you excuse it without consequence, it creates a culture of mediocrity. But if you hold them accountable, then choose mercy after they've demonstrated effort or loyalty. It becomes a gift, not an expectation. It regains its weight. Machiavelli understood human psychology. People admire virtue, but they follow strength. And the appearance of mercy should never override the presence of control. Mercy should be rare, deliberate, and tied to a strategic outcome. It should serve as a momentary pause, never the Default setting. When you use mercy as a calculated delay, you stay in control of the emotional tempo. U. Disarm hostility, reduce immediate backlash, and create a moment of silence where you can. Plan your next move, but you must never forget, if mercy isn't calculated, it's exploited. And, in the game of power, nothing is more dangerous than a virtue weaponized against its wielder. Power often flows downward, but attention flows upward. Those above you, your superiors, leaders, mentors, are always watching, not because they're nurturing, but because they're calculating. They want loyalty, not competition. That's why Machiavelli warns, never outshine the master, make them need you. To do otherwise is to invite insecurity, and insecurity at the top is lethal to those beneath it. Outshining the person in power, even unintentionally, creates resentment. When you make others look small, they will not praise your brilliance. They will plot your removal. It doesn't matter how useful you are or how good your intentions may be. In power dynamics, optics. Override logic. Your competence becomes a threat, your ambition a red flag. What they see is someone who might replace them, and that fear turns quickly into action, often behind closed doors. So what do you do if you're capable, sharp, and rising fast? You disguise it. You make your brilliance indirect. You redirect credit upward. You advise behind the scenes, not in public. You make the master feel smarter because of your presence, not overshadowed by it. You become essential without being envied, trusted without being feared. Machiavellian strategy is subtle. You don't suppress your value, you channel it. You solve problems others can't, but you allow your master to announce the solution. You anticipate needs, smooth conflicts, make them look decisive. You become the power behind the curtain, not the spotlight on stage. Over time, your presence becomes indispensable, not because you're loud, but because you're irreplaceable. This rule also protects your long-term influence. If you rise too quickly, you attract enemies before you have defenses. If you build quietly, you gain control before others realize it. Machiavelli valued time as a weapon. Slow advancement is often more secure than meteoric rise. When you master the art of making others feel safe while quietly becoming vital, you create a position no one dares to disturb. It's also a test of ego. Many talented individuals fail not because they lack ability, but because they lack restraint. They crave recognition too early. They want applause more than influence. But applause fades quickly, and influence endures. Machiavelli's world rewards patience, not pride. By hiding your strength behind loyalty, you gain both. In practical terms, always ask, does my success reflect back on my superior in a way that strengthens them? If the answer is yes, you're playing it right. If your achievements make them, question their relevance. You're entering dangerous ground. Adjust your presentation. Make them the hero, even when you built the strategy. Let their legacy be tied to your success. Then they'll protect you, not resent you. Eventually, there may come a time to step forward, but by then, your position will be so secure, your value so embedded, that replacing you would cause more harm than keeping you. That's the Machiavellian mastery, not to dominate loudly, but to be needed quietly. Because when people need you, they won't just tolerate your power, they'll defend it. Unity is rarely born from peace, it's forged in opposition. Machiavelli understood this. Deeply, people are easier to unite when they fear a common enemy. That's why the calculated creation of an enemy, whether real or imagined, is one of the most effective tools a leader can wield. When people feel threatened, their loyalty sharpens. Their attention focuses, and their differences dissolve, because nothing brings people together faster than the idea of a shared threat. Creating enemies isn't about stirring chaos without purpose. It's about giving your followers something external to push against, so they stop pushing against you or each other. In a vacuum, people squabble over status, identity, and petty disagreements, but introduce a villain, someone to blame, fear, or rally against, and suddenly you become the protector, the shield, the leader with clarity. The enemy doesn't need to be entirely real. Sometimes it's a rival group, an opposing idea, a corrupt institution, or a looming crisis. Sometimes it's a person. Other times, it's a symbol. The key is not the enemy itself, but the story. You craft a narrative that defines us by contrasting it with them. You give your followers a reason to band together, to sacrifice, and to follow your lead without hesitation. History is filled with examples. Political leaders rise to power by blaming outside forces. Religious movements gain momentum by warning against heretics or immoral outsiders. Even in business, companies create competitors in the public eye to stoke brand loyalty. Apple versus Microsoft, Coke versus Pepsi. These rivalries are not just market dynamics, they're tools of tribal cohesion. When people feel like part of a tribe, they commit harder. They defend more, fiercely. But this tactic must be managed carefully. A fake enemy that is exposed breeds cynicism. A real enemy that becomes too strong creates danger. The balance is to build just enough friction to keep your group alert, cohesive, and loyal without tipping into chaos. The enemy should always remain beatable, or at least manageable, so the narrative remains one of struggle, not hopelessness. Psychologically, people crave belonging, and belonging often requires contrast. It's not enough to say who we are, we need to define who we are not. That's where the enemy becomes useful. They clarify identity, they justify your rules, they excuse harsh measures, and they give your leadership urgency. Without them, your authority might be questioned. But with them, it becomes necessary. Machiavelli also noted that enemies provide an opportunity for heroism. You can demonstrate strength by resisting them. You can gain favor by defeating them. You can even use their resistance to justify expansion, reform, or discipline, and when internal dissent arises, you redirect it toward the threat. Instead of challenging you, your followers now turn their energy outward. In short, enemies are not just obstacles, they're assets, when chosen wisely and wielded. Strategically, they give your leadership momentum and your group cohesion. So when unity fades and purpose weakens, ask not what your followers lack. Ask who they need to oppose. Then step forward as the one who can lead them through it. Morality is a performance. In Machiavelli's world, appearing moral is often more valuable than actually being moral. Why? Because most people don't see your private decisions. They see your public image, and perception drives judgment. If you act ruthlessly but wear the mask of virtue, the masses will forgive, follow, and even defend you. But if you act with integrity and fail to look virtuous, they'll question your motives, doubt your leadership, and assume the worst. People crave the illusion of righteousness in their leaders. They want to believe their rulers are just, compassionate, and principled, even when they know deep down that the game of power is rarely pure. Machiavelli understood this paradox and taught that the wise leader does not need to be good. They only need to look good. The appearance of virtue grants you legitimacy. The performance of ethics earns you trust, while your real power moves happen quietly in the shadows. This is not hypocrisy. It's survival. A leader who shows their ruthlessness too openly invites rebellion. But a leader who cloaks strategy in moral language gains obedience. You can wage war, suppress opposition, and make brutal decisions, so long as you frame them in the language of duty, justice, or the greater good. Say it's to protect the people. Say it's for peace. Say it's to eliminate corruption. Wrap your ambition in noble cloth, and they will march behind. You? Even religious leaders, kings, CEOs, and political figures throughout history have used this rule. They build hospitals while exploiting labor. They fund charities while destabilizing economies. And yet they're adored because their image is spotless. They smile, quote scripture, visit orphanages, and speak of justice. Their actions may be calculated and cold, but the performance is warm and noble, and the public, preferring comfort over truth, accepts the mask. This strategy is especially powerful because those who appear moral are often granted more leniency when they make mistakes. Their followers will rationalize the error. He must have had a good reason. She's always stood for justice. This must be a misunderstanding. This moral credit becomes armor. People defend what they believe in, even when the facts contradict their belief. The danger lies in overplaying the role. If your image becomes too perfect, too saint-like, even a small mistake can shatter it. That's why the smartest manipulators show just enough humanity, small flaws, controlled vulnerability, moments of self-deprecation to appear real, humble, and trustworthy. The goal is not perfection. The goal is relatable virtue. In day-to-day leadership, this might mean delivering tough news with compassion, even if the decision was purely strategic. It might mean giving public praise to others while privately maneuvering to advance your position. You maintain the aura of fairness and humility, while operating with tactical precision beneath the surface. Machiavelli never discouraged morality, but he warned against naivety. Being good does not guarantee survival, but looking good while thinking ruthlessly gives you the edge. So smile with sincerity, speak of justice, act with restraint, and behind closed doors play the real game, quietly, decisively, and without guilt. Because power respects results, not intentions. And the world bows to appearances long before it recognizes truth. Explanations are for the defeated. In the Machiavellian world, justification is secondary. Winning must come first. This philosophy flips the common order of operations. Most people try to convince others before they act, hoping for approval, consensus, or validation. But Machiavelli understood something deeper. People don't listen to reasoning unless it comes from the victor. Once you've won, your actions become necessary. Until then, they're suspicious. That's why win first, explain later is not just about timing. It's about leverage, if you try to explain your actions while still in the middle of executing them. You invite scrutiny, resistance, and doubt. You're opening the door to interference before the outcome is secure. But if you secure the result, land the deal, gain the position, silence the rival, then people are forced to interpret your actions through the lens of success. You dictate the story because you hold the prize. Winning rewrites memory. People forget the discomfort of your methods when the results benefit them. A controversial decision becomes bold. A risky play becomes visionary and unorthodox. Move becomes strategic only after it works. No one questioned Alexander's audacity once his empire stretched from Greece to India. No one condemned political backdoor deals that led to victory. They're remembered as brilliance, not betrayal. This approach also keeps you unpredictable. If you move without over-explaining, you keep others guessing. You maintain the element of surprise. When people don't know what you're about to do or why, you keep the advantage. But once you explain in advance, you give opponents time to react, build resistance, or discredit you. Explanation becomes a weakness, unless it follows conquest. That's why the best leaders are often silent during the storm and articulate only when the dust settles. They don't warn you. They act. Then, once the action is complete, they step forward too. Offer a polished, palatable version of why it had to happen. And the public, seeing the new reality, accepts it. Because what choice do they have? The new status quo is already in place. This strategy also limits internal resistance. When people under your leadership see hesitation, polling, or committee-driven decisions, they sense weakness. But when they see decisive victory, especially one that solves a visible problem, they rally. And once they've benefited from your win, they're more likely to rationalize your motives and join the justification chorus. He had no choice. It worked out for everyone. That's why he's the leader. But be warned, winning must be clear. If your result is ambiguous or incomplete, and you try to justify it afterward, it looks like spin. It must be total, undeniable, even if brutal. Then the explanation doesn't need to be persuasive. It just needs to exist. People prefer a narrative, even if it's hollow, over uncertainty. In short, Machiavelli teaches this: act boldly, win thoroughly, and only then offer your reasons. Because in the court of public opinion, the victor writes the verdict, and the losers are too busy defending their losses to interrupt. Asking for permission is a gamble. It invites scrutiny, delay, and worst of all, denial. That's why Machiavellian thinkers understand the power of acting first and justifying later. Power favors momentum, not hesitation. The moment you stop to ask, you signal uncertainty. And uncertainty is what gives others the opportunity to control or block your actions. But when you move first, decisively, confidently, you create a new reality that others are forced to respond to rather than prevent. Most people fear disapproval more than they fear failure. They want to be liked, approved of, validated before they move, but that mindset keeps them trapped, because every time you wait for permission, you're handing control over to someone else. You're letting another person decide if your vision is acceptable, if your plan is worth pursuing, if your instincts are valid. And those in power rarely greenlight anything that shifts control away from them. Machiavelli's principle is not about recklessness, it's about calculated dominance. When you act first, you demonstrate confidence. You create outcomes. Then, once those outcomes are visible, you frame the story. You justify your decision with logic, results, or necessity. And here's the secret. People are much more forgiving of action than intention. If the outcome is useful, they'll forget they were never consulted in the first place. In fact, they may admire your decisiveness. This rule works especially well in environments plagued by bureaucracy or fear. In corporate settings, in government, in social hierarchies, nothing slows innovation like committees and approval chains. But when one person moves without waiting, they often cut through layers of hesitation, they get things done. And while they might be reprimanded at first, they're often rewarded later, because results speak louder than protocol. Justification is a powerful tool because it reframes the timeline. People assume your action must have been warranted because it already happened. It takes a bold opponent to reverse something that's working, even if it broke rules on the way in. And if they do try to reverse it, they become the one blocking progress, not you. That shift in perception becomes armor. There's also a psychological effect in those around you. People respect courage, even those who might disagree with your method will often concede that it took guts. And in leadership, guts are currency. People follow boldness. They admire those who act under pressure, not those who hesitate in meetings. Of course, this philosophy requires sharp judgment. Not every action can be walked back. If you act without permission and fail, you must own the consequences. That's the cost of playing at this level. But when you know the terrain, when you've measured the risk, and when you sense that asking will only stall momentum, move. Then, once it's done, speak calmly. Justify with facts, with logic, or with results. Frame it as necessary, as urgent, as something others would have done had they seen what you saw. In time, they'll forget the breach of protocol. What they'll remember is who had the courage to lead without waiting, and that memory builds the kind of authority no title can grant. Control doesn't always require direct confrontation. Sometimes the most effective power move is to step back and let others clash while you remain untouched. Machiavelli taught that one of the smartest ways to maintain dominance is to stir conflict among others to keep your hands clean. It's not about creating chaos for chaos' sake, but rather about orchestrating division in a way that preserves your authority while weakening potential threats. When your subordinates, rivals, or factions are in conflict with each other, they become distracted. They stop focusing on your position, your power, your influence. Instead, their energy is spent defending themselves, attacking one another, or proving loyalty. This fragmentation keeps them dependent on you, often begging for you to step in as the mediator or savior. And the moment they look to you to resolve their problems, you've already won. They've forgotten you started the fire. This tactic relies on subtlety. The best instigators never appear to be involved. You don't openly pit people against each other. You seed doubt, encourage rivalry, whisper compliments that plant insecurity. You praise one person to another in just the right way to trigger comparison. You ask small questions that amplify existing tension. Have you noticed how often he disagrees with you lately? She's been taking more credit than usual, hasn't she? Over time, these small sparks ignite into conflict, and while others are consumed by defending their turf or their pride, you continue to operate above the fray, collected, rational, and untouched. Your role becomes the calm leader, the steady force amid dysfunction. But the dysfunction was never accidental. You designed it. This method also serves as a powerful diagnostic tool. When conflict arises, you learn who is truly loyal. You discover hidden alliances, vulnerabilities, and ambitions. The way people behave in struggle reveals more than years of calm ever could. Some will crack under pressure. Some will rise. And you'll be there, observing, cataloging, and adjusting your inner circle accordingly. In politics, empires, and even modern workplaces, this rule thrives. Leaders who try to keep everyone united under idealistic harmony often lose control the moment a real conflict appears. but those who have already tested their environment, who have managed small, contained. Conflicts gain resilience. They build systems where no single rival can gain too much power because they're too busy fighting each other to organize against the top. But Machiavelli was clear: do not let the conflict spill over. You must always retain the ability to resolve it, keep it contained. A war that spirals too far creates instability, and instability can turn on the orchestrator. You are not stoking rebellion. You are keeping equilibrium through. Manage tension. The ultimate effect is elegant control. Others act rashly. Others make enemies. Others look petty. You remain above it, even as the very structure they're fighting in is shaped by your silent hand. You keep your image intact, your power consolidated, and your rivals busy and in doing. So you prove that leadership isn't always about leading the charge. It's about moving the pieces so others charge each other, while you never break a sweat. Mercy can be fatal when granted to a weakened enemy. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. If you strike, strike to end it. Destroy your enemy completely. No pieces left. Partial defeat invites future retaliation. A spared rival becomes a long-term threat. And history is filled with examples where half measures allowed wounded opponents to return stronger, vengeful, and more dangerous than before. When you leave a fragment of your enemy intact, whether that's their reputation, resources, allies, or influence, you leave them something to rebuild with. And worse, you give them time to adapt. A defeated enemy learns your strategies, studies your weaknesses, and prepares for a rematch. That second encounter is often bloodier, more personal, and harder to win. You're not fighting an equal anymore. You're fighting someone who has nothing left to lose. This rule applies across all arenas: political, personal, professional. In politics, toppled leaders who are allowed to remain in the public eye often return under the banner of martyrdom. In business, a competitor you crush partially may pivot, regroup, and outmaneuver you years later. In personal relationships, someone you expose but don't completely cut off may continue to spread rumors, poison alliances, or sabotage your influence behind closed doors. That's why the Machiavellian path demands finality. If you're going to move against someone, your aim should be total elimination, not always physically, but reputationally, socially, and structurally. Remove their access to power. Discredit them so thoroughly that no one dares align with them. Dismantle the networks that support them. Ensure there's no platform for a comeback. This doesn't mean unnecessary cruelty. It means decisive action. The goal is not sadism. The goal is to prevent resurgence. Your move must be so complete that others learn from it too. It must carry the lesson: this is what happens to those who challenge me. But this tactic requires timing and justification. Strike too early and you look paranoid. Strike without narrative and you look tyrannical. The key is to wait until the moment is right, until the enemy makes a misstep or reveals a threat. Then act swiftly and thoroughly, making it clear that you are not removing a rival for personal gain, but for the preservation of order, loyalty, or justice. Frame it well, and even your most brutal move will be seen as necessary. This also creates deterrence. Future rivals will think twice before turning against you. They'll remember what happened to the last person. They'll consider whether they're truly prepared to go to war, because they'll know you don't fight halfway. This aura of finality protects you long after the conflict has ended. And once your enemy is gone, don't resurrect them by dwelling on them. Let them vanish into irrelevance. Don't speak their name. Don't reference the battle. The silence itself becomes part of the lesson. You don't defeat threats, you erase them. In doing so, you signal to the world that your authority isn't open to challenge, not because you're cruel, but because you know that. Power without finality is always on borrowed time. Hope inspires, but fear endures. That's the harsh Machiavellian truth. If you want to build a legacy that lasts, build it on fear, not hope. Hope is fleeting. It rises in good times, fades in hardship, and turns into resentment when expectations aren't met. But fear creates structure. Fear builds order. Fear lingers even in your absence, and that's what makes it a foundation, not a decoration. Hope relies on belief. It asks people to imagine a better future, to trust in ideals, to follow you, because they want to, but human nature is volatile. People are easily disappointed. If their hopes aren't fulfilled quickly, they turn on the very leader who once inspired them. History is full of reformers who were adored in the beginning until progress slowed and the crowd that once cheered demanded blood instead. That's the danger of building a legacy on hope. It's fragile, it's emotional, and it places your image in the hands of the masses. Fear, however, is reliable. It's not about cruelty, it's about consequence. A fearful leader doesn't have to constantly please, promise, or persuade. Their authority is reinforced by the knowledge that stepping out of line has a cost. That cost doesn't have to be brutal. It just has to be certain. When people believe that betrayal leads to exile, dissent leads to demotion, or defiance leads to punishment, they behave. And their respect doesn't rely on mood. It's grounded in self-preservation. This is how Machiavellian leaders ensure stability, not through endless optimism, but through clarity. The lines are clear, the boundaries are firm, the expectations are enforced. That doesn't mean they're hated. If anything, they're often admired, because people crave structure more than they admit. They want to know someone's in control, that someone is watching. That consequences exist. Hope can be useful, but only in small doses and always under control. Give people just enough to keep moving forward, but never let hope become the core of your leadership. If your image depends on people liking you, you're one bad day from collapse. But if your presence commands respect, and respect rooted in fear, you can withstand much more. Even after you're gone, a legacy built on fear carries weight. Your name becomes a reminder. That's the standard. He wouldn't have allowed this. You become a reference point, people. Don't dare defy. Whereas hope vanishes with failure, fear echoes. It becomes institutional. Memory. It outlives charisma. This principle works in organizations, families, movements, any structure with power dynamics. If you're always the nice one, you'll be stepped over when pressure hits. But if you're the one, people hesitate to disappoint, the one whose silence means something, the one whose rules have teeth. Your influence stretches far beyond your words. You don't have to raise your voice. Fear speaks for you. So build your legacy like a fortress. Hope may paint the walls, but fear must pour the foundation. Let them admire you, but make sure they remember you, not for what you promised, but for what you enforced. Because in the world of power, legacy is not about being loved. It's about never being forgotten. In the game of power, the truth is not what happened. It's what people believe happened. That's why Machiavelli's cold wisdom tells us, control the narrative, even if you must lie. Because facts can be buried, but stories spread. Perception shapes reality, and whoever frames The story first often owns it permanently. Most people assume truth wins out in the end. It doesn't. What wins is the version of events that is most believable, most emotionally resonant, or most widely repeated. If your enemies tell the story first, even your victory can look like villainy. But if you control the narrative through influence, media, or message discipline, you shape the lens through which everyone else is forced to see the world. Lying in this context isn't about fabricating nonsense. It's about shaping the truth in ways that serve your purpose. It's exaggeration, omission, reframing. It's making your weakness look like strategy, your mistake look like courage, your ambition look like sacrifice. You don't rewrite facts. You realign meanings. You decide what those facts stand for. This is why the most powerful leaders are storytellers. They don't just act, they explain. And they don't explain what is, they explain what it means. A scandal becomes a political attack. A betrayal becomes a test of faith. A ruthless move becomes hard leadership. Once people internalize the story, they defend it, even when the facts start to fray. When you lie well, you don't just fool others, you shape the culture. You make your version of events the default. People who question it look paranoid, disloyal, or misinformed. You don't. Suppress opposition directly. You make it socially costly to dissent. This is narrative dominance, and it's more effective than censorship or force. Of course, the risk lies in being caught. But here's the Machiavellian insight. Even when lies are exposed, they often leave a residue. Doubt, confusion, division, and that's useful. If you can't, make people believe your version. Make them doubt every version. In that fog, you become the only stable voice, the one offering clarity, even if it's built on illusion. This principle operates everywhere: politics, business, media, even personal relationships. In an argument, if you define the terms early, the other person is forced to argue within your frame. If you make yourself the misunderstood victim, it doesn't matter if you were wrong. People will. Start looking for ways to justify your behavior. That's the emotional power of narrative. But narrative control requires consistency. Your message must be simple, repeatable, and adaptable. Don't chase every accusation. Anchor the story in a theme. They're threatened by my success. This is about reform, not revenge. People fear change. These refrains work not because they're always true, but because they're sticky. And sticky messages outlast facts. So tell your story first. Tell it loud. Tell it often. And if the truth doesn't serve you, bend it until it does. Because in the end, people don't follow facts. They follow the voice that makes the most sense of their fear, their hope, and their confusion. Be that voice, and you won't just win the moment. You'll win the memory. Charity, at its surface, appears generous. It paints the giver as noble, compassionate, and selfless. But in the hands of a Machiavellian strategist, charity becomes a weapon, one that controls through gratitude, dependency, and public perception. It is not just an act of kindness. It's a calculated move to gain influence and secure obedience. When you give something to someone, especially in a time of need, you create a psychological debt. They may say thank you, but what they feel, often subconsciously, is obligation. This is the first layer of control. People are far less likely to oppose or criticize someone who has helped them, even if the help came with strings attached. The recipient becomes hesitant, cautious, deferential, and that hesitation is leverage. But the true power of charity isn't found in private giving. It's in public spectacle. When others see you giving, sponsoring, donating, or saving, you don't just gain respect, you shape your reputation. You're no longer seen as a strategist or power player. You become a good person. And once that label sticks, your actions are judged more favorably. People become more forgiving, more trusting, more loyal, not because of your integrity, but because of your image. Machiavelli understood that image and control are inseparable. When charity is visible and well-timed, it disarms opposition, it silences critics, and it pulls the undecided into your camp. After all, who would dare question the motives of someone who's feeding the poor, funding the school, or rebuilding the church? They'll be accused of cynicism or jealousy. This moral shield allows you to pursue power more aggressively behind the scenes. Charity can also weaken your enemies by offering resources, protection, or opportunities to those on the fence, or even within rival camps. You quietly shift their allegiance. Not through threats, but through favors. The person who relies on your generosity becomes reluctant to stand against you. They become your mouthpiece, even without realizing it. And over time, you replace loyalty born of fear with loyalty born of dependence. There's also a long-term benefit: institutional loyalty. When you fund programs, support communities, or build infrastructure, you create systems that carry your name and legacy. Schools, hospitals, and scholarships act as monuments to your generosity and reminders of your power. People grow up thanking you without ever meeting you. That's enduring influence. But Machiavellian charity requires balance. Too little, and people suspect greed. Too much, and you appear soft or naive. The key is targeted generosity. Give where it builds loyalty, where it earns publicity, or where it shifts power dynamics in your favor. Never give without purpose. Never rescue without return. And when the time comes to withdraw support, do so strategically. Let others feel the loss of your charity. Let them remember what life was like with your support. This reinforces the idea that your presence is not just helpful, it's essential. In the end, charity is not the opposite of control. It's one of its most refined forms. Used well, it turns gratitude into obedience, dependency into loyalty, and virtue into power. It allows you to dominate gently. And in a world that distrusts brute force, gentle dominance often wins. Chaos breaks systems, but it also breaks routines. And that's where opportunity lives. Machiavelli understood that in moments of disorder, the rules dissolve. Structures loosen. Hierarchies wobble. People panic, search for direction, and grasp for certainty. That's when the person who remains calm, strategic, and bold can reshape the landscape to their advantage. Chaos isn't something to fear, it's something to use. Most people freeze during crisis. They wait for stability to return before making their move. But the Machiavellian thinker knows that waiting too long is a mistake. In chaos, timing is everything. The fastest to act becomes the one others follow, if only because they're moving, while everyone else is still deciding what to do. Momentum becomes authority. Confidence becomes credibility. Action becomes leadership. During turmoil, loyalties shift more easily. People reevaluate their allegiances not because they've changed beliefs, but because they crave protection and stability. If you can provide that, or appear to, you can recruit allies you never could have swayed during times of peace. Even enemies can become useful if they believe you're the only one with a viable plan. When the ground shakes, people don't care who's right. They care who looks ready. This principle plays out across history. Revolutions, economic crashes, wars, and pandemics all produced leaders and empires, not in spite of the chaos, but because of it. The most adaptable. Players knew how to read the moment, move quickly, and fill the power vacuum left behind by crumbling systems. They rewrote laws, consolidated influence, and emerged stronger than those who tried to ride out the storm. Turning chaos into opportunity also means redefining your own weaknesses. If you've been underestimated, ignored, or sidelined, a chaotic moment allows you to reintroduce yourself. You can shift your identity, take bold actions, or reposition yourself while others are too distracted to resist. The usual gatekeepers are often disoriented during crises, which means new paths too. Power can open without resistance, but it's not enough to merely survive the chaos. You must shape it. That might mean fanning certain flames to weaken a rival, or seizing a moment of institutional breakdown to propose your own framework, policies, or leadership. The key is to stay emotionally detached. While others react, you must calculate. While others seek to restore the past, you must build something new. It's also important to remember that order eventually returns. The chaos doesn't last forever. So, whatever moves you make, they must be aimed at securing long-term positioning. Don't just survive the fire. Build your throne in the ashes. People will look back and say, "He rose when everything fell apart." That kind of story cements power. Finally, understand this. Chaos exposes what was fragile. Systems that collapse during crisis were never strong to begin with. When you thrive in disorder, you signal strength that's real, not borrowed. And that signal draws resources, followers, and influence your way. So when the world trembles, don't retreat. Step forward, not recklessly, but with precision. Because the one who moves strategically in chaos doesn't just endure it, they inherit what it leaves behind. Loyalty is a currency, but like all currency, it has a value, and that value fluctuates. Machiavelli recognized that betrayal, when timed correctly and executed with precision, can be one of the most profitable moves in the game of power, but it comes with a rule. You can betray once and gain from it. Betray twice and you destroy your reputation, your alliances, and your leverage. The first betrayal, if done strategically, marks you as decisive. It says you're not bound by sentiment or tradition. You move with results in mind. You're willing to cut loose the weak, the disloyal, or even the once useful if doing so gains you something greater: power, protection, or survival. It shows others that your loyalty has limits, and in politics, that makes you dangerous and therefore respected. But the danger lies in repetition. A second betrayal brands you as unpredictable. It tells others that even if they support you now, they might be next. Trust evaporates. You become isolated, not feared. You become toxic, not strategic. The first betrayal, if smartly framed, can be rationalized. The second is remembered as character. So, if you must betray, it must count. It must bring such a significant reward that the fallout is worth it. Think of the advisor who switches allegiance in a political campaign at the last minute to join the winning side. If it delivers influence, position, or safety, that betrayal was a calculated risk that paid off. But if they switch again at the next sign of trouble, they're no longer an asset to either side. They're a liability, a walking warning. The key to successful betrayal is the story. You must control the narrative. Make it seem like the betrayal was not personal but principled, that you were pushed, that the other side failed you first, or that you saw a higher duty, a bigger cause. If others believe your betrayal was rare, reluctant, and reasoned, they'll still trust you in the future because they believe they won't be. The exception. This rule also works in organizational power. If you must cut ties with a partner, a team member, or a sponsor, do it once and do it cleanly. Then rebuild your trust bank. Reestablish yourself as someone reliable, stable, and committed until and only if another rare opportunity arises, where the gain is too great to ignore. But even then, hesitate. Ask yourself, will this betrayal place me above the fallout or buried beneath it? Because long-term power doesn't come from constant shifting. It comes from credibility. The people around you must believe that you are usually loyal but capable of decisive action if provoked or if necessary. That balance creates respect. People won't test you. But if you cross the line too often, they'll unite against you, not because of the betrayal itself, but because of what it predicts about the future. So betray once if you must. Make it surgical. Make it powerful. But never again. Because in Machiavelli's world, power gained through betrayal only lasts if those around you believe it was your last. Predictability is a weakness. When your enemies can anticipate your moves, they begin to disarm you, not with confrontation, but with preparation. That's why Machiavelli understood the power of cultivating mystery to keep rivals unsure. If they don't know what you're thinking, what you're planning, or what you're capable of, they can't coordinate an effective attack. Uncertainty is a form of defense. It's also a tool for dominance. Mystery creates hesitation. When people don't fully understand you, they become cautious. They start to overthink. They guess, project, and second-guess every move you make. That mental energy slows them down. While they hesitate, you act. While they watch, you maneuver. Your unpredictability becomes a force field. They don't want to step too close because they don't know what will happen next. You don't need to be erratic. Being mysterious doesn't mean being chaotic. It means being selective with your words, calculated with your timing, and intentional with your silences. Say less than necessary. Leave things implied. Use pauses, glances, or a controlled emotional responses to keep others reading into things that aren't there. The more they analyze, the more distracted they become. Their assumptions become tools you can later turn against them. Mystery also elevates your presence. People are fascinated by what they can't fully grasp. If you reveal everything, your thoughts, motives, routines, you become ordinary. But if you're hard to read, you gain an aura. People talk about you more. They speculate. They build myths in your absence. And those myths often amplify your power far beyond the truth. This principle is especially powerful in leadership. A leader who reveals every detail of their strategy loses control. But a leader who gives just enough, who shares the why, but not always. The how keeps people attentive. They listen more carefully. They ask questions. They wait for cues. That kind of attention can be turned into loyalty. People tend to follow what they don't fully understand, especially if it consistently produces results. Mystery also weakens alliances among your enemies. If they're not sure what you're planning, they're less likely to band together. They may even distrust each other. One may believe you've already struck a secret deal with the other. Doubt spreads, paranoia grows, and when paranoia takes root, unity collapses. You don't need to divide your enemies directly. Just remain a question mark in their equations, and they'll divide themselves. But mystery must be managed. Too much, and people may grow suspicious or lose confidence. Too little, and they'll map you out like a simple pattern. The goal is controlled ambiguity. Keep. Your rival's just unsure enough to be cautious, but not so confused that they stop engaging. All together. The best strategists hide their full intent without appearing dishonest. They keep the spotlight slightly off-center, so no one's ever sure where the next move is coming from. In the end, mystery is not a mask. It's a mirror. Let others project their fears, ambitions, and insecurities onto you. Then use that distorted reflection to guide them where you want them to. Go. Because when no one can predict you, no one can contain you. And in the world of power, that is the ultimate edge. Weakness, when used strategically, becomes a trap. Machiavelli understood that what appears to be vulnerability can be turned into bait if you control the exposure. Most people reveal weakness as confession. They seek sympathy, validation, or relief. But in power dynamics, this kind of honesty rarely brings safety. It invites exploitation. The smart operator shows weakness, selectively, not to be understood, but to manipulate. When you confess weakness, you hand others a weapon. You give them insight into your insecurities, your blind spots, your past mistakes. In the wrong hands, this information turns into leverage. Rivals will mask their judgment behind smiles, but they'll store your admissions for future use. And allies, no matter how close, may one day grow distant, and your past. Confessions may haunt you when alliances shift, but when you pretend to be weak, when you let others believe you're broken, hesitant, or incapable, you lull them into false confidence. That's the bait. They drop their guard. They underestimate you. They speak more freely. They show their cards, and in their overconfidence, they make mistakes. They reveal information, take risks, or align with others based on the belief that you're not a threat. That's when you strike. This tactic is as old as war itself. Great generals have faked retreats to lure their enemies into ambushes. Leaders have played the fool to avoid suspicion while quietly consolidating power. Even in business, companies sometimes let a product fail to make competitors overcommit to a similar path, only to pivot and dominate another niche. These are not accidents, they're orchestrations. To apply this in personal settings, consider how you handle criticism. Instead of defending yourself aggressively, allow others to believe they've uncovered a flaw. Nod, agree softly, maybe even apologize. While they relax into the role of superiority, you watch, you learn, you plan. Later, you'll act with information they never realized they gave you. The key is control. You must never truly believe in the weakness you project. It must be intentional. You are not showing wounds, you are showing costumes if you start identifying. With the false weakness, you've lost the upper hand, but if you remain aware, you can shift the performance as needed, weak when they expect strength, strong when they expect collapse. Using weakness as bait also helps in negotiations. If you appear too powerful, others push back harder. But if you show struggle, lack of options, urgency, or minor losses, they may feel sympathy or believe they've outmaneuvered you. They offer better terms, thinking they've won. Meanwhile, you get what you wanted all along. People often overlook this because they equate power with dominance. But real power is about control, and sometimes control comes from invisibility, from being underestimated. Machiavellian thinkers understand that the person who appears weak holds a different kind of Strength, the power to dictate the battlefield by setting the emotional tone. So don't confess. Design. Don't expose your real pain. Offer a version of it that serves you. Because when others chase shadows of your weakness, they never see your strategy. And by the time they do, they're already caught. Power often demands risk, and risk demands cover. Machiavelli knew this well, which is why he advocated for a principle as ruthless as it is effective. Let others take the fall for your ideas. When a strategy succeeds, you can step forward and claim it. When it fails, or when it sparks. Backlash. Someone else should absorb the consequences. This is not cowardice. It's insulation. It's how lasting influence is preserved while others burn out in the line of fire. The game of leadership, politics, or even corporate ambition is rarely about who came up with the idea. It's about who survives it. Great power isn't built on endless victories, it's built on avoiding critical losses. That means keeping your fingerprints off the most controversial or high-risk plays until you know how they will land. You float ideas through proxies. You test theories using lieutenants, advisors, or figureheads. If the plan works, you quietly position yourself to benefit. If it fails, you've already created distance. This tactic requires delegation with precision. You must select people who are competent, enough to carry out your ideas, but not ambitious enough to redirect the credit upward. You give them just enough authority to act, but not enough to escape accountability. They become the face of the plan while you remain behind the curtain, adjusting as needed. They believe they're being empowered, but in reality, they're serving as a human shield. Timing is critical. If public reaction to the plan is good, you slowly begin aligning yourself with it. You speak about it in favorable terms, reference its values, and eventually take credit for having guided it behind the scenes. You let others paint you as the architect retroactively. But if the reaction is poor, if it incites resistance, failure, or scandal, you disown it completely. It was his initiative. I was misinformed. This was never fully vetted. You sever the connection swiftly and cleanly. This also builds plausible deniability. You can appear open-minded, willing to test ideas from others, even tolerant of failure. Meanwhile, you're the one deciding which ideas rise and which ones die based on public and political wind shifts. Others take the fall, while you retain the image of balanced leadership. But this isn't just about avoiding blame. It's also about conserving power. Every public failure erodes authority. Even if you recover, the perception of fallibility lingers. By allowing others to absorb the impact of failure, you preserve your strategic position. Your name stays intact. Your influence remains untouched. You are still the one people trust to lead, even though someone else bore the weight of a broken decision. Of course, this tactic must be wielded with finesse. If people begin to notice a pattern, many take the fall while you remain pristine, they'll start to question the fairness. So, occasionally take partial responsibility, show humility, but always make sure that the real damage lands elsewhere. You've already planned for it. Because in the end, those who climb to lasting power don't just generate ideas. They know exactly who should take the credit, and more importantly, who should take the hit. In the relentless pursuit of power, enemies are obstacles to be overcome, neutralized, or destroyed. But Machiavelli saw a subtler use for those once considered foes. Praise your enemies when they're no longer a threat. This principle isn't about hypocrisy or false flattery, it's about strategic reconciliation and the psychological advantage that comes with transforming adversaries into symbols of respect. When your enemies lose their power to harm, honoring them serves your long-term dominance. First, praising a former enemy humanizes you. It shows magnanimity, a quality admired across cultures and eras. When you acknowledge the strengths, virtues, or achievements of those you once opposed, you elevate yourself in the eyes of observers. You demonstrate confidence, not only in your victory, but in your ability to rise above petty grudges. That perception of nobility attracts allies, disarms critics, and solidifies your reputation as a leader of stature. Second, this praise rewrites the narrative. Former enemies become part of your legacy, a chapter in the story of your success. Instead of perpetual conflict, your reign is seen as one that transcends bitterness. You show that you can recognize greatness even in opposition, and that your leadership includes generosity of spirit. This narrative can calm lingering tensions within your domain. It signals to others that conflicts have ended and stability has returned, encouraging cooperation rather than rebellion. Moreover, praising a defeated enemy serves as a subtle warning to current or future challengers. It conveys the message that while you are capable of crushing opposition, you are also capable of respect and fairness when victory is secured. This blend of strength and grace creates a psychological balance that makes potential enemies think twice. You are no tyrant, but a ruler with limits and honor, a combination that fosters fear and admiration simultaneously. There's also a practical benefit in repairing relationships. Once your enemy's threat is nullified, integrating them, or their followers, into your circle can strengthen your position. Public praise can open doors for reconciliation, alliances, or at least peaceful coexistence. Former enemies might become useful advisors, loyal subjects, or bridges to factions you previously couldn't access. By honoring them, you reduce resentment and gain goodwill, turning past conflict into future opportunity. This principle is often observed in history. Great leaders have praised rivals in victory speeches, memoirs, or diplomatic correspondence. They've honored fallen foes with monuments or ceremonies, showing that their reign is about legacy, not vengeance. Such actions elevate their own status beyond mere conquest, portraying them as wise statesmen rather than mere conquerors. However, timing is crucial. Praise must come only when the enemy is no longer a threat. Premature praise can be seen as weakness or pandering. It's a gesture for the secure victor, not the insecure contender. It signals that you have nothing to fear, no reason to antagonize, and full control of the situation. In personal and organizational dynamics, this tactic helps close chapters cleanly. It lets people move past conflicts and focus on new goals. It also diffuses ongoing hostility by recognizing merit, which can transform resentment into respect. When people feel seen, even as former opponents, they're less likely to harbor grudges. Ultimately, praising your enemies when they're no longer threats is a powerful statement of strength. It says you won the battle, and now you own the peace. It shifts the story from conflict to resolution, and in doing so, it secures your position not just through force, but through the wisdom of restraint and the power of respect. Power struggles are won long before the final confrontation. Machiavelli understood that the best way to defeat a powerful rival is to prevent them from becoming powerful in the first place. Isolate powerful rivals before they grow. This principle is about preemptive action, about recognizing threats early, limiting their alliances, and cutting off their sources of strength before they can challenge your position. Rivals don't gain power in isolation. They build networks, form alliances, gather resources, and cultivate influence. If left unchecked, these networks create momentum that's difficult to reverse. The key is to identify emerging threats early and act swiftly to disrupt their connections. When a rival stands alone, they're vulnerable, not just physically or materially, but psychologically. Isolation breeds insecurity, reduces their options, and weakens their base. Isolation can take many forms. It might mean sowing distrust between the rival and their potential allies. You plant doubts, rumors, or subtle critiques that erode confidence. Allies begin to question loyalty, intentions, or competence. This fracturing prevents strong coalitions from forming. Without a united front, rivals are easier to manage or outmaneuver. Another method is controlling resources. Power relies on access to information, capital, manpower, or legitimacy. By limiting a rival's access, you stunt their growth. You make it difficult for them to recruit supporters, fund campaigns, or influence key decision-makers. Without resources, ambition falters. Without connections, strategy fails. Isolation also serves a psychological function. A rival cut off from allies feels exposed. They become reactive rather than proactive, constantly defending rather than advancing. Their energy is spent trying to repair relationships or fend off attacks rather than building their own. Base. This mental state creates openings for you to consolidate your own position or strike decisively. In some cases, isolation can be social or symbolic. Marginalizing a rival's reputation or discrediting their character can alienate them from influential circles. When people perceive a rival as toxic, unreliable, or dangerous, they hesitate to associate with them. This social isolation deepens their vulnerability. This principle requires vigilance and subtlety. Overt attacks too early may rally support around your rival or make you appear insecure. Instead, isolation often involves behind the scenes maneuvers, quiet whispers, strategic favors to potential allies, or carefully timed interventions. The goal is to create doubt and distance without triggering full-scale conflict prematurely. Historically, successful leaders have mastered isolation. They dismantle potential coalitions. Before they solidify, co-opt key figures from rival camps and control narratives to cast doubt on opponents. This ensures that when the time comes to confront the rival directly, they stand. Weakened and alone, much easier to defeat. Isolation also buys time. A rival kept in check cannot grow influence rapidly, allowing you to strengthen your own position, build alliances, and prepare defenses. Timing is critical. The longer you wait, the more entrenched your rival becomes. Early, consistent isolation disrupts the natural momentum that powers often gain. In modern contexts, corporate, political, or social, the tactic remains relevant. Blocking a competitor's access to networks, funding, or public platforms slows their rise. Undermining their credibility discourages collaboration. And quietly fostering divisions within their support base keeps them distracted. Ultimately, isolating powerful rivals before they grow is about proactive control. It's about shaping the battlefield before the war begins. When you prevent threats from becoming threats, you don't just win, you avoid losing. This principle is a cornerstone of Machiavellian strategy. Because power is easier to preserve when challenges never fully materialize. Emotions are the language of influence, but they are also the currency of control. Machiavelli understood this deeply and taught that to wield power effectively, you must exploit the emotions of others but never reveal your own. This principle is about mastering emotional intelligence without surrendering emotional vulnerability. It's a fine line between using feelings as tools and becoming captive to your own. Human beings are driven by emotion. Fear, hope, anger, loyalty, jealousy all shape decisions and behavior. Leaders who recognize and manipulate these emotions gain tremendous advantage. By tapping into fear, you can motivate caution and obedience. By invoking hope, you inspire loyalty and sacrifice. By provoking jealousy, you create competition that can serve your aims. Understanding the emotional currents in a group allows you to steer the collective mood, align interests, and preempt resistance. But this manipulation requires emotional detachment on your part, revealing your own feelings, whether anger, fear, joy, or sorrow, signals weakness. It offers opponents a window to exploit your vulnerabilities. If you show frustration, rivals will press harder. If you display overconfidence, you invite challenges. If you reveal kindness or doubt, you risk losing respect or control. In the game of power, emotions are weapons, and you cannot wield a weapon if you hold it too close. To maintain this balance, you must cultivate a composed exterior. Your face, tone, and gestures should communicate calm and control, regardless of internal turmoil. Silence is often more powerful than speech. A steady gaze commands authority. A measured voice deflects tension. When others are caught in emotional storms, your coolness becomes a beacon, a signal that you are in charge, not them. This detachment doesn't mean you are emotionless. Machiavelli was not advocating for becoming a robot, but for emotional discipline. You feel, but you do not show. You use your emotions as information and energy, but never as display. The ability to mask inner feelings while responding effectively to the emotions of others is a hallmark of strategic leadership. Exploiting emotions also means reading people deeply. Learn what motivates them. Observe their fears, desires, and insecurities. Tailor your words and actions to resonate with these feelings. Praise selectively to build loyalty. Sow doubt subtly to create division. Use empathy not to reveal your heart, but to understand theirs. When you can anticipate emotional reactions, you can shape outcomes before conflicts arise. This principle applies in politics, business, diplomacy, and personal relationships alike. Consider how a politician may use rhetoric to stir patriotism or fear while maintaining a calm demeanor behind the scenes, or how a negotiator senses hesitation and plays on it without revealing their own uncertainty. In all cases, emotional exploitation is about power gained through emotional leverage, not emotional exposure. However, the risk of failing this principle is severe. Leaders who lose control of their emotions often appear unstable, unpredictable, or weak. They give opponents ammunition and lose the trust of followers. Emotional outbursts erode authority and invite challenges. On the other hand, leaders who master this balance project confidence and command respect, even in crisis. In essence, exploit emotions, but never show your own, is a rule of strategic emotional management. It turns feelings from a liability into a tool. It transforms empathy into influence. It requires self-awareness, patience, and discipline. And when mastered, it creates a presence that shapes the hearts and minds of others while keeping your own intentions and vulnerabilities securely hidden. Negotiation is not a friendly exchange. It is a battle for advantage. Machiavelli understood that. You should never negotiate with equals. Instead, create an imbalance that forces the other side to concede. When two parties enter a negotiation on equal footing, the outcome is uncertain. Both have leverage, both have power, and both have the option to walk away. In such scenarios, compromise becomes a necessity, and you risk losing control. The key to true dominance in negotiation lies in shifting the balance of power before you ever sit at the table. Creating imbalance means positioning yourself as the indispensable player, the one who holds, something your counterpart desperately needs or fears losing. It could be control over a critical resource, exclusive access to information, or the power to influence others who matter. When you can frame the negotiation so that the other party depends on you more than you depend on them, you enter with the upper hand. This changes the dynamic from a discussion of equals to a demand for concessions. One classic way to create imbalance is to cultivate alternatives. If you have other options, your reliance on any single deal diminishes. This reduces your vulnerability and signals strength. Meanwhile, if your opponent lacks alternatives or faces urgency, their negotiating power shrinks. You don't need to threaten or bully, you simply hold a better hand. And in that moment, they must choose between your terms or a costly loss. Another tactic is controlling time. Pressure can break even the strongest negotiators. If you can, speed up the timeline or force quick decisions while you remain composed, you make the other party uncomfortable and more likely to accept unfavorable terms. Conversely, delaying tactics can be used to wear down opponents when you have superior resources or endurance. Time, like alternatives, is a weapon when wielded strategically. Information asymmetry is also crucial. The more you know about your opponent's needs, weaknesses, and limits, and the less they know about yours, the greater your leverage. You create imbalance by controlling what is revealed and what is concealed. Negotiating from a position of information superiority allows you to craft offers that seem generous but actually benefit you disproportionately. Psychological imbalance matters as well. Confidence projects power. Hesitation reveals vulnerability. By cultivating calm, certainty, and assertiveness, you unsettle your opponent. They sense that you believe you are in control, which can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. People often yield to those who project dominance, even when the facts don't fully support it. Importantly, imbalance doesn't have to be obvious. Subtle shifts, like making the other party feel your indispensability or your willingness to walk away, can tip scales without confrontation. Negotiations that appear balanced on the surface may hide deep imbalances created through preparation and positioning. Attempting to negotiate as equals often leads to deadlock, mediocre agreements, or mutual dissatisfaction. It's a level playing field where neither side can fully win, but creating imbalance lets you set the terms, shape the agenda, and steer outcomes. It's not just about winning a deal. It's about controlling the narrative and future interactions. Ultimately, Machiavelli's wisdom reminds us that negotiation is power in action. To negotiate effectively, you must arrive with strength, real or perceived, and engineer a situation where the other side's dependence on you becomes undeniable. When you master this, concessions flow. Naturally, you don't bargain, you dictate, and that is the essence of dominance. Peace is often seen as the calm after the storm, a moment to relax, rebuild, and lower defenses. But Machiavelli saw peace differently. To him, preparing peace with the same rigor and seriousness as preparing for war is essential to lasting power and security. Peace, after all, is not a permanent state, but a fragile balance, vulnerable to disruption. The leaders, who neglect its defense, risk losing everything when conflict inevitably returns. Preparing for peace means anticipating threats even when they seem dormant. It means recognizing that enemies, rivals, and internal factions do not vanish simply because violence has ceased. Instead, they may be regrouping, rebuilding, or plotting quietly. A wise leader uses peace not to let their guard down, but to strengthen their position, secure alliances, and fortify defenses. Peace should be a strategic pause, not a surrender. This principle demands continuous vigilance. Just as armies train during peacetime, so too must statesmen, business leaders, and individuals sharpen their skills, consolidate resources, and maintain readiness. Military forces remain on alert. Intelligence networks stay active, diplomatic. Channels are monitored and managed. Peace becomes a zone of preparation, not complacency. Building strong institutions is part of this preparation. Stable governance, loyal administration, and effective communication channels all contribute to resilience. When the machinery of power runs smoothly, the transition from peace to conflict and back becomes manageable. Fragile or corrupt institutions, on the other hand, crumble at the first sign of pressure, leaving leaders exposed. Economic strength is another pillar. Peace provides the opportunity to accumulate wealth, invest in infrastructure, and support innovation. But this wealth must be guarded and directed wisely. It funds defense, diplomacy, and development. Neglecting economic preparation during peace invites vulnerability to sudden shocks, whether financial crises, resource shortages, or external sanctions. Moreover, peace should be used to foster alliances and influence. Diplomacy isn't only for crisis moments. It is a constant exercise in building trust, exchanging favors, and creating dependencies. When peace is treated as a strategic asset, relationships deepen and potential. Adversaries become partners, or at least neutralize threats. Psychologically, preparing for peace like war means cultivating the mindset of readiness and resilience. Leaders must resist the temptation to relax entirely or assume that good intentions are universal. They acknowledge that peace is fragile and requires constant stewardship. This awareness shapes decisions, communications, and policies. In history, the leaders who failed to prepare for peace often found themselves blindsided. They disarmed too soon, neglected alliances, or failed to rebuild after conflict. Their enemies exploited these gaps ruthlessly. Conversely, those who invested in peace as actively as war created conditions for lasting stability and enduring power. This principle transcends military contexts. In business, companies that rest on past success, without preparing for market shifts, technological disruptions, or competitor advances, find themselves outpaced. In personal relationships, individuals who ignore underlying tensions. During calm, risk-explosive conflicts later, preparing peace means addressing issues before they become crises. Ultimately, Machiavelli's insight teaches that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the preparation for the next phase of competition. Treat peace as a battlefield where strategy is exercised, resources are marshaled, and influence is expanded. When the inevitable storm returns, you will stand ready, not because you hoped for peace, but because you prepared for it. True mastery and power is revealed not just in winning, but in how you win. Machiavelli understood that making your victories look effortless is as important as the victories themselves. When success appears natural, smooth, and inevitable, it amplifies your aura of strength, intimidates rivals, and inspires loyalty. Effortless victory is a performance of dominance. That communicates you are in complete control, even when the reality was hard-fought. People are drawn to confidence. They admire those who make the difficult seem easy. When you display struggle, hesitation, or visible strain, you invite doubt. Observers question whether you deserve your position or if you're on the verge of collapse. But when you move with grace, decisiveness, and calm, even in the face of resistance, you send a message. Your power is unshakable. Your opponents become discouraged, while supporters grow more devoted. Creating the illusion of ease requires preparation and discipline. Behind the scenes, the effort is real, hours of planning, sacrifice, and adjustment. But in public, the display is controlled. You conceal uncertainty with poise. You mask setbacks with subtle redirection. You choose timing carefully so that every action flows logically, every move appears deliberate and well-rehearsed. This principle extends beyond physical battles to negotiations, leadership, and strategic decisions. A leader who presents a deal as an obvious outcome rather than a compromise dominates the narrative. A strategist who reveals only the final, successful plan, not the countless failures, builds a reputation for brilliance. By controlling what others see, you shape their perception of your capability. Moreover, effortless victories foster psychological advantage. Your enemies become hesitant, afraid to challenge someone who seems invincible. They imagine your resources and support as boundless, your intellect as unmatched. This fear often causes them to falter before the confrontation even begins, reducing the likelihood of resistance. But there's a deeper effect on your followers. When people witness success that appears natural, they gain faith in your leadership. They believe in your ability to guide them through uncertainty. This trust transforms into loyalty as followers feel protected and confident under your command. They invest their energy and allegiance willingly, amplifying your power. Maintaining this appearance requires emotional control. Victory celebrations should be measured, not excessive or desperate. Defeated opponents deserve acknowledgement, but never gloating. Your demeanor should reflect the calm assurance of someone who expected success all along. This balance between humility and confidence keeps you respected rather than resented. Importantly, avoid revealing the full scope of your challenges. Transparency about struggle can humanize you, but too much detail about difficulty risks undermining authority. Share just enough to inspire empathy, but not enough to weaken your image. Remember, the public doesn't need to know every obstacle, only the final outcome. Historical leaders who mastered effortless victory became legends. Alexander the Great's campaigns appeared swift and decisive. Napoleon's conquests often seemed unstoppable. Modern entrepreneurs who launch products seamlessly dominate markets. This appearance of ease creates myths that outlive the leader, cementing legacy. In essence, making your victories look effortless is about controlling perception. It's a strategic blend of preparation, discipline, and presentation. The goal isn't to fool others permanently, but to inspire confidence, intimidate rivals, and shape reality in your favor. When others see you winning with ease, they stop questioning your power, and that is where true dominance begins. In the delicate dance of power, timing and understanding are everything. Machiavelli's principle of mirror your enemy before you strike is a profound strategy rooted in observation, patience, and calculated imitation. Before you unleash your attack, you must first see the world. Through your enemy's eyes, understand their moves, motivations, strengths, and weaknesses, and then reflect their behavior back to them. This mirroring creates familiarity and complacency, setting the stage for a decisive strike when they least expect it. Mirroring your enemy is not about mimicry for its own sake. It's about matching their pace, tone, and tactics in a way that disarms suspicion. When your adversary sees their own strategies and behaviors reflected, they believe you are predictable, manageable, or even aligned with their goals. This illusion of similarity lowers their defenses and obscures your true intentions. It makes you appear less threatening, encouraging them to reveal more of themselves and expose vulnerabilities. By engaging in this psychological reflection, you buy time to learn. You observe their patterns, when they attack, when they retreat, who they trust, and how they react under pressure. This intelligence is priceless. It allows you to anticipate their next move and prepare a response, tailored for maximum effect. Without this insight, striking blindly risks failure. But with it, you transform uncertainty into advantage. Mirroring also provides emotional leverage. People tend to trust those who behave like themselves. This is a basic human tendency rooted in social psychology, called the chameleon effect. When you mirror someone's behavior subtly, they feel a subconscious bond. Your enemy may become less guarded, less aggressive, even inadvertently cooperative. This softening is a strategic opening. Once you've established this reflective rapport, the strike comes as a shock precisely because it breaks the pattern. You shift from imitation to innovation. You exploit the exact moments and angles your enemy didn't expect. The contrast between your previous alignment and sudden aggression amplifies the impact of your move. It's like a calm sea suddenly roaring into a storm. This principle extends beyond warfare to negotiations, business competition, and even personal conflicts. In negotiations, mirroring your counterpart's language and demeanor builds rapport and trust, allowing you to guide discussions toward your desired outcome. In business, studying a competitor's strategies and emulating their strengths helps you stay relevant while you prepare a disruptive innovation. In personal disputes, reflecting an opponent's tone and posture can neutralize hostility before you assert your position. However, successful mirroring requires subtlety. Overdoing it or appearing insincere can backfire, revealing your manipulation and provoking distrust. The goal is to blend seamlessly, not caricature. Your behavior should echo theirs enough to build comfort, but remain authentic to your own style and objectives. Moreover, patience is key. Mirroring isn't a quick tactic. It's a deliberate process. You don't rush to strike, but wait for the perfect moment when your enemy's guard is down and their weaknesses are clear. Acting prematurely undermines the strategy and wastes opportunity. In summary, mirror your enemy before you strike teaches that victory is not just about force, but about understanding and psychological mastery. By reflecting your opponent's behavior, you disarm suspicion, gather intelligence, and create openings for decisive action. It transforms confrontation into calculated strategy, turning your enemy's own image against them and securing your advantage with precision and timing. Power is often misunderstood as outright domination, forcing compliance through visible constraints and rigid rules. But Machiavelli revealed a more sophisticated and enduring strategy: offer freedom while tightening control. This paradoxical approach grants others the illusion of autonomy, choice, and empowerment, while simultaneously embedding mechanisms that maintain, and even expand your authority behind the scenes. It's a delicate balance that, when mastered, secures loyalty, reduces resistance, and sustains long-term dominance. At first glance, freedom appears antithetical to control. Genuine freedom means absence of coercion, the ability to act without external restraints. But in practical power dynamics, freedom can be engineered. When people believe they have options, they feel respected and motivated. This sense of agency creates goodwill and engagement. They are less likely to rebel or seek alternatives because they feel their desires and opinions matter. In essence, offering freedom becomes a tool to manage behavior through consent rather than force. However, the freedom on offer is carefully crafted and limited. You set the boundaries. What choices are available, what actions are permitted, and which paths are encouraged. These choices often steer people toward outcomes favorable to your interests, even if they don't. Realize it. This is where control tightens subtly. By designing the framework within which freedom operates, you ensure that autonomy does not equate to unpredictability. Instead, it becomes predictable and manageable. For example, a leader may allow team members to choose how to complete a project but defines the objectives, deadlines, and acceptable methods. Employees feel empowered by the flexibility but remain aligned with the organization's goals. The control lies in the parameters, not in micromanagement. This balance motivates innovation and commitment without sacrificing order or discipline. Offering freedom also serves as a psychological pacifier. People resist overt control because it triggers fear, resentment, or defiance. But when control is disguised as freedom, resistance diminishes. Individuals believe they are partners in decision-making rather than subjects of authority. This cooperation reduces friction and fosters a sense of shared purpose. Politically, this principle manifests in systems where citizens enjoy rights, participation, and voice, yet the central government maintains control through laws, surveillance, or institutional power. The illusion of democratic freedom coexists with mechanisms that preserve the ruling structure. This duality maintains stability by satisfying the human craving for liberty while preventing chaos or upheaval. Furthermore, offering freedom while tightening control is a dynamic process. As people's expectations shift, so too must the balance between autonomy and constraint. Too much freedom without structure leads to disorder. Too much control without freedom breeds rebellion. Skilled leaders adjust this balance continuously to maintain harmony and dominance. This strategy requires subtlety and sophistication. If freedom is perceived as a sham, too restrictive or manipulated, people feel betrayed, and the legitimacy of your power erodes. Transparency about the boundaries, combined with genuine opportunities for meaningful choice, builds trust. People may never fully grasp the extent of control behind the scenes, but they will sense authenticity. In interpersonal relationships, this principle helps maintain influence without coercion. Offering a friend or partner space to make decisions, while guiding those decisions toward beneficial outcomes, strengthens bonds and reduces conflict. It's a form of soft power that respects individuality while steering collective harmony. Ultimately, offering freedom while tightening control is about managing perception and reality simultaneously. It acknowledges the human desire for agency and leverages it to create voluntary compliance. This dual approach protects authority not through fear or force alone, but through engagement, consent, and the artful shaping of choice. It's a hallmark of enduring. Power because it transforms control from an external imposition into an internalized. Acceptance, where people choose to follow, believing they are free. In the realm of power and influence, appearances matter, but actions define reality. Machiavelli's. Counsel to smile with your mouth, strike with your actions, embodies a vital strategic. Balance between diplomacy and decisive strength. It's about presenting calm, warmth, and approachability while maintaining the capacity for swift and uncompromising action behind the facade. This principle teaches that power is not just what you do, but how you appear while doing it. Smiling with your mouth represents controlled expression, a deliberate presentation of friendliness, openness, or even vulnerability. It disarms opponents and builds rapport. People naturally respond more positively to warmth and kindness. A smile can soften tensions, encourage cooperation, and mask true intentions. It's the social lubricant that allows influence to flow smoothly. But this smile must be carefully managed. It's a tool of persuasion and patience, not a sign of weakness. Behind that smile, however, lies the readiness to strike decisively. Actions are the ultimate language of power. Words and expressions can soothe or deceive, but actions carry consequences. When the moment arrives to assert authority, enforce decisions, or confront challenges, your actions must be unambiguous and forceful. Hesitation or half measures diminish respect and invite challenges. The contrast between your gentle exterior and your resolute actions creates an aura of unpredictability and control. This duality serves multiple purposes. First, it prevents opponents from reading you easily. If you show all your cards, anger, frustration, or impatience, you lose the element of surprise. But if you maintain a composed demeanor, people struggle to gauge when and how you'll act. This uncertainty keeps rivals cautious and respectful. Second, it fosters trust and loyalty among allies. A leader who appears approachable encourages open communication and cooperation. People feel safe to express ideas and concerns without fear of overreaction. This openness creates stronger bonds and a more resilient support network. Yet, when needed, the leader's actions remind everyone that kindness is balanced by strength, ensuring order and discipline. Historical figures embodying this philosophy often combine charm with ruthless efficiency. They engaged diplomatically, smiled in meetings, and made peace offerings. But when necessary, they executed plans with brutal precision. Their opponents never quite knew when the knife would fall, which enhanced their power. In personal relationships, this balance is equally vital. Displaying warmth and kindness builds connection, but backing words with meaningful action, standing firm on boundaries, following through on commitments, or addressing conflicts directly earns respect. The disconnect between soft expression and strong action can confuse manipulation, but when genuine, it reflects emotional intelligence and leadership maturity. Mastering this principle requires emotional discipline. You must regulate your facial expressions and tone without suppressing genuine feeling entirely. The smile should not be robotic or insincere. It should be a conscious choice to project calm and openness. Simultaneously, you must prepare mentally and practically to act decisively when situations demand. This readiness conveys strength beneath the surface. Timing is crucial. Smiling without action when action is required can be perceived as weakness or deceit. Conversely, striking without relational warmth can isolate and alienate. The power lies in knowing when to soften and when to harden, to build bridges and to erect barriers as circumstances dictate. Ultimately, smile with your mouth, strike with your actions is about strategic duality. It's the art of combining empathy with authority, openness with resolve, charm with discipline. This balance keeps others off balance, strengthens alliances, and secures lasting influence. It reminds us that power is not merely about force, but about how force is wielded and perceived. In any system of power, loyalty is the foundation upon which authority rests. But absolute loyalty can be dangerous. When a group unites too strongly, it becomes a force that can challenge or overthrow leadership. Machiavelli understood this well, which is why he advocated for dividing loyalties to prevent rebellion, by creating subtle divisions, competing interests, and overlapping allegiances. A leader ensures that no single faction grows powerful enough to threaten the whole. This fragmentation is a deliberate and strategic way to maintain control. When loyalties are divided, individuals and groups focus more on their own position relative to each other than on challenging the central authority. Rivalries and competition among subordinates keep them occupied and distracted. They become wary of each other, guarding their own interests rather than uniting against their leader. This internal friction reduces the risk of a coordinated uprising or conspiracy. Dividing loyalties doesn't mean fostering chaos or outright conflict. Instead, it involves carefully balancing incentives, privileges, and responsibilities so that no one feels completely secure or indispensable. For example, a leader might grant privileges to one faction while limiting those of another, keeping both dependent and cautious. Or they might rotate key positions of power among different groups to prevent any from consolidating too much influence. This strategy also relies on the principle of divide and rule. By encouraging competition, suspicion, or even subtle distrust between groups, a leader can manipulate these dynamics to their advantage. When factions compete for favor or resources, they become less likely to collaborate in rebellion. Instead, they see each other as rivals, not allies. This division weakens collective opposition. In many historical contexts, rulers maintained their dominance by preventing the rise of a united nobility or aristocracy. They balanced one powerful family against another, granted privileges unevenly, and promoted loyalists to sow dissent. By fragmenting the power base, they created a system where everyone had something to lose if they challenged the sovereign, but little incentive to support rivals. This principle applies beyond monarchies and governments. In organizations, business, and social groups, leaders who allow one department, team, or individual to become too dominant risk losing overall control, encouraging overlapping responsibilities, fostering healthy competition, or creating checks and balances keeps power distributed and prevents anyone part from becoming a threat. However, dividing loyalties requires careful management. Too much division can lead to dysfunction, low morale, or outright rebellion born from frustration. The leader must maintain the illusion of fairness and unity even while encouraging subtle competition. They must appear as the ultimate arbiter, the indispensable mediator who holds the disparate parts together. Communication plays a key role. A leader reinforces their central authority by reminding factions that their interests are ultimately tied to the leader's success. Promises, threats, and symbolic gestures help maintain allegiance even amid division. The leader becomes the pivot point, the one without whom the fractured pieces cannot hold together. Dividing loyalties is a long-term strategy. It's about preventing the conditions for rebellion before they arise. It's easier to keep potential rivals off balance than to crush a united front after it has formed. The skill lies in knowing how much to divide, when to intervene, and how to maintain control without alienating supporters. Ultimately, dividing loyalties to prevent rebellion is a testament to the complexity of power. It acknowledges that unity among followers can be as dangerous as disloyalty. By fostering controlled division and competition, a leader preserves their authority, manages risks, and ensures that rebellion remains a distant threat rather than an immediate crisis. It's a strategy of subtlety, foresight, and psychological insight, hallmarks of Machiavellian mastery. In the ruthless arena of power, survival often demands hard choices and uncompromising actions. Machiavelli's lesson is clear. Own your ruthlessness. Don't apologize for survival. This philosophy confronts the uncomfortable truth that to maintain authority and protect one's position, sometimes you must act with severity, make sacrifices, and engage in behavior that others might judge harshly. But instead of shrinking from this reality, embracing ruthlessness unapologetically becomes a source of strength and legitimacy. Ruthlessness is often misunderstood as cruelty or moral failure. Society teaches that kindness, forgiveness, and compromise are virtues to be pursued at all costs. Yet in the crucible of leadership, unchecked compassion can become a liability. When mercy is extended without strategy, when hesitation overrides decisiveness, the foundation of power weakens. Ruthlessness, when applied wisely, is a tool for survival, not wanton destruction. Owning your ruthlessness means acknowledging that power is a game of winners and losers. You accept that protecting your interests may require tough decisions that displease some. You don't seek approval or sympathy for these actions. Instead, you stand firm, confident that such measures are necessary. This confidence deters challengers. When others see that you do not regret your decisions, they are less likely to test your resolve. Apologizing for ruthlessness signals weakness. It invites questions about your commitment and stability. It encourages adversaries to exploit perceived hesitation. But when you own your actions, declare them purposeful and unavoidable, you shift the narrative. You position yourself as a leader who puts survival and success above sentimentality. That stance earns respect even from enemies because it reveals an unwavering dedication to power. Historically, powerful figures who embraced ruthlessness without apology carved out empires. And legacies. Their decisiveness and willingness to act firmly, regardless of criticism, enabled them to outmaneuver rivals and consolidate control. Conversely, leaders who hesitated, regretted, or apologized for tough choices often lost authority, invited rebellion, or became ineffective. Owning ruthlessness also entails emotional discipline. It requires separating personal feelings from strategic imperatives. You do not let guilt, fear, or doubt dictate your actions. Instead, you maintain clarity of purpose. This mindset protects you from second-guessing and paralysis, empowering you to act swiftly when circumstances demand. Moreover, transparency about ruthlessness can be disarming. When you openly acknowledge that you will do what is necessary, you remove ambiguity. Potential adversaries understand the stakes and the consequences. This clarity can prevent conflicts before they arise, as others weigh the costs of opposition. However, owning ruthlessness doesn't mean abandoning ethics altogether. It means recognizing that leadership involves balancing compassion with strength, mercy with discipline. It means wielding ruthlessness strategically, knowing when to apply it fully and when to temper it for long-term gains. This calculated approach distinguishes effective leaders from tyrants. In personal and professional contexts, embracing this philosophy means accepting responsibility for difficult decisions without seeking external validation. It means leading with integrity, even when integrity involves hard truths. It means understanding that survival in competitive environments is not about popularity, but about effectiveness. Ultimately, own your ruthlessness. Don't apologize for survival is a call to courage. It challenges leaders to accept the realities of power, to act decisively, and to project confidence. It transforms ruthlessness from a stigma into a strength, a necessary armor that protects your vision, your position, and your legacy in a world that respects only results and resolve. In the pursuit of power, destruction is often inevitable. To dismantle old structures, remove obstacles or eliminate rivals, you must sometimes break down what exists. But Machiavelli understood that destruction alone breeds fear, resentment, and instability. That's why he counseled, rebuild what you destroy to be seen as savior. This principle transforms ruin into renewal, framing your actions not just as conquest, but as creation, thereby securing lasting authority and loyalty. Destruction is raw and visceral. It shocks communities, unsettles allies, and enrages opponents. If a leader only tears down, they risk becoming a figure of dread, a tyrant who leaves chaos in their wake. Fear may force obedience temporarily, but it rarely inspires true allegiance. People follow those who offer hope, stability, and progress. The act of rebuilding signals that your power isn't just about taking, it's about giving back, restoring order, and fostering growth. When you rebuild after destruction, you recast yourself as a savior. You shift from being the agent of chaos to the architect of renewal. This shift is powerful psychologically. Followers who witness destruction may feel vulnerability and loss, but if they also see reconstruction, new opportunities, improved infrastructure, or revitalized institutions, they associate your leadership with positive transformation. The narrative becomes one of salvation rather than devastation. Rebuilding also serves practical purposes. It restores essential systems that support your power, economies, governments, social order. Without these, control is unsustainable. Reconstruction stabilizes the environment, reduces unrest, and legitimizes your rule. It turns former enemies into beneficiaries, transforming potential opposition into gratitude or dependency. Moreover, the act of rebuilding allows you to imprint your vision onto what replaces the old. You don't merely restore the past, you shape the future. New laws, institutions, or cultural norms reflect your values and priorities. This redefinition of the status quo secures your legacy and guides the direction of power long after your immediate actions. Historical examples abound. Conquerors who razed cities only to rebuild them grander were remembered as great leaders, not mere destroyers, reformers who dismantled corrupt regimes, but replaced them with functional governments gained lasting support. Even in business, companies that disrupt markets but invest in innovation and customer service win loyalty and market dominance. This principle requires a strategic balance. Destruction without reconstruction breeds chaos. Reconstruction without decisive disruption leads to stagnation. You must know when to break and when to build. Both acts must be integrated parts of your leadership. Timing matters as well. Rebuilding should begin quickly enough to reassure but deliberately. Enough to show control. If the aftermath drags too long without visible progress, fear returns. If reconstruction is rushed and poorly executed, it invites criticism. The optics of rebuilding are as important as the substance. Rebuilding also provides opportunities to mend relationships. Former adversaries, communities, affected by upheaval, and skeptical allies can be engaged through reconstruction efforts. Inclusive rebuilding builds social capital and diffuses tensions. In essence, rebuild what you destroy. To be seen as savior captures a profound truth about power. It is not just about force, but about perception, legitimacy, and vision. Destruction alone isolates. Rebuilding connects. It's the difference between being feared as a tyrant and revered as a leader. And it's the path to enduring influence in a world that values both strength and renewal. In the complex dance of power and influence, perception often outweighs reality. Machiavelli recognized this when he taught that leaders should give the people symbols, not substance. This principle underscores the power of imagery, ritual, and symbolism in maintaining authority, shaping beliefs, and securing loyalty, even when the tangible benefits may be limited or delayed. Symbols evoke emotion, unify groups, and create shared identity far more effectively than concrete actions alone. People crave meaning and belonging. They seek narratives and signs that affirm their place in the world and connect them to something greater than themselves. Symbols, flags, ceremonies, slogans, uniforms, and monuments serve as anchors for these desires. They are easier to grasp than complex policies or delayed promises. Through symbols, leaders communicate values, intentions, and power in a form that resonates deeply and immediately. When leaders provide symbols, they offer more than objects or gestures. They offer hope, pride, and emotional investment. Even when resources are scarce or reforms slow, symbols maintain morale and allegiance. They transform abstract ideals into tangible expressions that people can rally around. This emotional engagement often sustains loyalty during difficult times when substance alone might not suffice. Consider historical examples. Monarchs who wore elaborate crowns and robes projected legitimacy and divine right. Revolutionary movements used flags and anthems to unite diverse followers. Political leaders staged grand ceremonies to display strength and unity. These symbols created a sense of inevitability and righteousness that transcended practical governance. They made people feel part of a larger cause. Symbols also serve as tools of control. They simplify complex realities into digestible narratives, guiding public perception. A carefully crafted symbol can distract from shortcomings or failures. By focusing attention on identity and pride, it allows leaders to shape the story that people tell themselves about their nation, community, or organization. Even controversial or unpopular policies become more palatable when wrapped in symbolic language. Importantly, symbols foster conformity. Shared symbols create social pressure to align with group norms. People internalize the values represented and police deviations within their circles. This social cohesion strengthens the leader's position by creating a collective identity that resists fragmentation. However, this principle requires a delicate balance. Relying solely on symbols without meaningful substance risks disillusionment. When people realize symbols mask emptiness, cynicism grows, loyalty wanes, and unrest can follow. Effective leaders combine symbolic gestures with genuine, if gradual, improvements. The symbols act as a bridge, maintaining support while substance develops. In modern contexts, political campaigns use slogans and imagery to capture hearts even before. Policies are detailed. Corporations brand themselves with logos and narratives that promise lifestyle and values, often more than products. Even community leaders host festivals or rituals that create a sense of belonging and shared history. These symbolic actions shape perception and influence behavior. Symbols also allow for flexibility. They can be adapted to changing circumstances without losing their emotional power. Leaders can reinterpret symbols to align with new goals or challenges, maintaining relevance and connection with their followers. Ultimately, giving the people symbols, not substance, is a recognition that power is as much about perception and emotion as it is about concrete outcomes. Symbols create unity, inspire devotion, and simplify complex realities into narratives that sustain authority. They are the language of influence that speaks directly to the human need for meaning. And in the intricate game of leadership, mastering symbols can be the difference between fleeting control and lasting legacy. Laws are often seen as the backbone of order, fairness, and justice. Yet in the pursuit and maintenance of power, Machiavelli offers a starkly pragmatic view. Use laws when they serve. You break them when they don't. This philosophy is not an endorsement of chaos or anarchy, but a recognition that laws are tools, flexible instruments to be wielded strategically rather than sacred commandments to be followed blindly. At their core, laws are frameworks created to regulate behavior, allocate power, and maintain stability. For leaders and power players, laws provide legitimacy. When you invoke the law to justify your actions, you align yourself with order and tradition, which builds public trust and deters opposition. Obedience to laws, or at least the appearance of it, signals that you respect the established system and can be relied upon to uphold social contracts. This makes allies more comfortable and rivals more cautious. However, laws are not always aligned with your interests. They can be cumbersome, outdated, or manipulated by others to constrain your power. In such cases, rigid adherence to the law becomes a liability. When laws limit your ability to act decisively or undermine your strategic goals, breaking or circumventing them becomes necessary. Machiavelli argues that true power requires flexibility. You must be willing to transgress when the law becomes an obstacle, but do so with discretion to avoid unnecessary backlash. The key is balancing legality with necessity. Breaking the law openly risks legitimacy and invites retaliation, but covert or calculated breaches can shift power without triggering full resistance. Leaders who master this principle act within the law when it enhances their authority and break, or bend it when survival or advancement demands it. This dual approach maximizes advantage while minimizing risk. Historically, successful rulers and strategists often manipulated laws to suit their agendas. They used legal frameworks to consolidate power, suppress enemies, or gain public favor. Simultaneously, they sidestepped or rewrote laws when these hindered their objectives, whether through decree, reinterpretation, or simply ignoring inconvenient rules. This flexibility allowed them to adapt to changing circumstances and maintain dominance. In modern governance and business, this philosophy manifests as pragmatic legalism. Effective leaders know when to comply with regulations to maintain credibility and when to challenge or exploit loopholes for competitive gain. They understand that laws are human constructs, subject to interpretation and change, not immutable truths. By navigating these complexities skillfully, they preserve influence and agility. This approach requires subtlety and judgment. Reckless lawbreaking without cause damages reputation and invites punishment. Conversely, blind obedience limits agency. The art lies in discerning which laws uphold your position and which stifle it, then acting accordingly. Transparency can be sacrificed for strategic opacity when needed, but must be weighed against the cost to trust. Ethically, this principle challenges conventional morality but reflects realpolitik. It demands that leaders prioritize outcomes over ideals, recognizing that rigid legality may serve others' interests more than their own. Power is a contest, and laws are one of many tools to be mastered or discarded in pursuit of victory. Ultimately, using laws when they serve you and breaking them when they don't embodies pragmatic leadership. It blends respect for order with strategic defiance. It requires wisdom, courage, and discretion. And when practiced skillfully, it transforms laws from shackles into instruments, shaping the world not just through compliance, but through calculated mastery. In the realm of power and influence, identity is a currency, and discretion is its security. Machiavelli understood that changing your mask often and never letting others know who you really are is a vital strategy for survival and dominance. This principle isn't about deceit for its own sake, but about protecting your true intentions, desires, and vulnerabilities behind a shifting facade that keeps rivals, allies, and observers off balance. A mask is more than just a disguise. It's a carefully curated persona tailored to the context and the audience. By adopting different masks, you adapt to changing circumstances, expectations, and power dynamics. You become a chameleon, flexible, unpredictable, and difficult to pin down. This fluidity prevents others from fully understanding your motives or predicting your actions, which is a crucial advantage in competition. Revealing your true self is risky. It exposes your weaknesses, fears, and strategies. When people see who you really are, they gain ammunition. They understand what drives you, what scares you, and how to manipulate or undermine you. Transparency in power struggles is vulnerability. By hiding behind masks, you control what is revealed and what remains hidden. You decide when to show strength and when to feign weakness. Changing masks frequently also prevents others from becoming complacent. When rivals believe they understand you, they feel confident in challenging or outmaneuvering you. But if you present different faces, sometimes charming, sometimes distant, sometimes ruthless, sometimes conciliatory, you keep them guessing. This uncertainty creates hesitation and fear. Opponents are less likely to attack when they're unsure what they'll face. Allies, too, benefit from your masks. Different groups may require different versions of you. One that inspires trust, another that demands respect, and yet another that projects benevolence. By tailoring your persona, you maximize influence across diverse circles. But you never let any single group see behind the veil entirely. This prevents any faction from gaining undue leverage over you. This strategy requires self-awareness and emotional discipline. You must understand your core motivations and values so deeply that you can separate them from your public persona without losing yourself. Your masks are tools, not prisons. You choose when and how to wear them, maintaining control over your image and narrative. History offers countless examples of leaders and strategists who mastered the art of the mask. They presented themselves differently to friends and foes, to the public and to private councils. Their true intentions were hidden behind layers of performance, making them enigmatic and formidable. Those who failed to mask effectively were often betrayed, underestimated, or worship your victories recognizes that the way triumphs are perceived and internalized by. Followers can shape the longevity and strength of your authority. When victories are not only won but celebrated and revered, they become symbols of legitimacy, inspiring loyalty, and deterring dissent. Training others to worship your victories is about creating a culture of admiration and emotional investment. This goes beyond simply announcing success. It involves crafting rituals, narratives, and shared experiences that elevate your achievements into collective myths. By doing so, victories become part of the group's identity, making your leadership synonymous with progress and greatness. Followers come to see your successes as their own, binding their fortunes to your continued dominance. This process begins with storytelling. Every victory, whether a political win, military conquest, business achievement, or personal milestone, should be framed as a pivotal moment, rich with meaning and symbolism. The story highlights not only the result, but the struggle, the vision, and the unique qualities that made the victory possible. This narrative positions you as a visionary leader whose actions transform fortunes, inspiring awe and confidence. Rituals and ceremonies amplify this effect. Public celebrations, commemorative events, and symbolic gestures create emotional resonance around victories. They engage the senses and emotions of followers, making success tangible and memorable. Such rituals also serve social functions, uniting people under a shared experience and reinforcing group cohesion. When victories are marked with grandeur, they leave lasting impressions that transcend the immediate moment. Worshipping victories also fosters psychological loyalty. When followers are trained to revere your achievements, they develop a vested interest in your continued success. Their identity becomes linked with your leadership, making it difficult for them to entertain dissent or betrayal. This emotional bond transforms passive supporters into active defenders of your authority, willing to mobilize in your defense when challenged. This principle also works as a deterrent against rivals. When your victories are widely celebrated and worshipped, challengers face not only your power, but the collective will of your followers. The aura of invincibility discourages opposition and fosters an environment where your position is accepted as natural and unassailable. Historical examples abound of leaders who cultivated this culture, from ancient generals who paraded spoils and told heroic tales to modern politicians who brand themselves with successful policies and landmark legislation. The practice of training followers to worship victories has been a cornerstone of enduring power. However, this strategy requires consistency and authenticity. Empty victories or exaggerated claims can breed cynicism. Followers eventually discern substance from spectacle. Therefore, victories must be genuine and meaningful, and celebrations must be sincere and inclusive. This balance ensures that worship is rooted in reality, strengthening rather than undermining. Credibility. In organizational contexts, leaders who highlight team successes and frame achievements as collective triumphs motivate their members and build loyalty. In personal leadership, acknowledging milestones and reinforcing progress encourages commitment and shared purpose. Ultimately, training others to worship your victories transforms success from a fleeting event into a lasting foundation of power. It shapes perception, builds emotional allegiance, and creates a protective shield against challenges. Through storytelling, ritual, and psychological bonding, Leaders turn their triumphs into legends, ensuring that their authority is not only acknowledged, but revered, securing influence for the long term. In the complex landscape of power and leadership, relationships are valuable assets, but not all relationships serve your interests indefinitely. Machiavelli's principle to cut ties fast when they become a liability is a pragmatic approach to maintaining strength, stability, and forward momentum. This philosophy recognizes that clinging to connections that hinder progress or threaten your position can be more damaging than letting them go swiftly and decisively. Liabilities in your circle can take many forms. Allies who falter under pressure, associates who become unreliable or disloyal, partners who attract negative attention, or connections that drain resources without yielding benefits. While loyalty and long-term bonds are important, they must be balanced against practical considerations. When a relationship shifts from asset to liability, hesitation to sever it can lead to erosion of power and loss of credibility. Cutting ties fast is about decisiveness and foresight. Delays in addressing problematic relationships allow issues to fester, leading to greater complications. A single compromised ally can undermine your reputation, leak sensitive information, or incite opposition. When you act swiftly, you limit damage and signal to others that your leadership prioritizes effectiveness and accountability. This principle requires clarity in evaluation. Not every difficulty signals liability, but clear patterns of behavior, conflicting interests, or emerging threats should prompt reassessment. Leaders who ignore warning signs risk being blindsided by betrayal or collapse from within. Recognizing when a tie has become dangerous is a critical skill that combines intuition, observation, and strategic thinking. Swiftly cutting ties also serves as a warning to others. It establishes that loyalty is conditional and that consequences exist for failure or disloyalty. This maintains discipline within your ranks and discourages complacency. Others become aware that your leadership is serious and that support must be earned and maintained. However, cutting ties must be handled with care to avoid unnecessary fallout, abrupt or public. Severance can create enemies and provoke retaliation. Skilled leaders manage transitions, discreetly framing departures in ways that minimize conflict and preserve dignity when possible. Maintaining some level of professionalism or goodwill, even in separation, can prevent further damage and keep future options open. History offers many examples of rulers and leaders who failed to cut ties when needed, resulting in devastating betrayals or the weakening of their power base. Conversely, those who acted decisively, removing threats quickly, often strengthened their control and deterred future challenges. In contemporary contexts, this principle applies in business, politics, and personal relationships alike. Companies must part ways with underperforming partners or toxic employees. Politicians distance themselves from scandal-ridden allies. Individuals disengage from harmful relationships that impede growth. The speed and decisiveness of these cuts reflect maturity and a strategic acumen. Cutting ties fast does not equate to ruthless abandonment. It is a calculated act of self-preservation and strategic management. Leaders who master this balance demonstrate strength without unnecessary cruelty, ensuring that their networks remain robust and focused. Ultimately, cutting ties fast when they become a liability is about prioritizing long-term success over short-term sentiment. It is the willingness to make difficult decisions promptly to protect your position and vision. This philosophy empowers leaders to maintain a dynamic, reliable support system and to navigate the shifting currents of power with agility and confidence. In the subtle art of power, words can inspire, persuade, or deceive, but sometimes silence, paired with an aura of intimidation, is the most effective form of communication. Machiavelli's principle to let fear do the talking. Before your words arrive emphasizes the strategic advantage of cultivating a presence that commands respect and caution even before you speak. Fear, as a psychological force, primes others to listen, comply, or hesitate, setting the stage for your influence to take hold more easily. Fear operates on a primal level. It bypasses rational thought and triggers instinctual responses, aimed at self-preservation. When others perceive you as a formidable presence, someone capable of swift and severe consequences, they become attentive and cautious. This readiness to listen is not born from admiration, but from a desire to avoid harm. Fear creates an atmosphere where your words carry weight because the audience is already prepared to take you seriously. Cultivating fear before speaking requires more than intimidation tactics. It's about consistent behavior, reputation, and control over one's demeanor. Leaders who maintain a calm yet authoritative presence signal strength and certainty. Their silence conveys confidence, suggesting they have nothing to prove verbally because their history and posture speak volumes. Opponents and allies alike feel the gravity of their presence and anticipate their next move. This principle leverages anticipation and uncertainty. When people fear potential consequences, they fill in the gaps with imagination, often exaggerating threats or abilities. This psychological inflation amplifies your power without additional effort. By the time you speak, your words reinforce already established perceptions, making persuasion or commands more effective. Fear also acts as a deterrent. When rivals know that you command respect or retribution, they are less likely to challenge you openly. The fear of what you might say, or worse, do, can prevent conflicts from arising. It places you in a position of control where others tread carefully, giving you strategic advantages in negotiations, leadership, or competition. However, fear must be balanced with wisdom. Over-reliance on intimidation risks alienating allies or provoking backlash. Effective leaders use fear not as blunt force, but as a tool to shape behavior and guide interactions. The goal is not to terrorize, but to establish boundaries and expectations that others respect. Historically, rulers who mastered the art of commanding fear before speaking were often the most formidable. Their silence was a warning, their presence a prelude to decisive action. In diplomacy, generals, and courts, this quiet power shaped outcomes as much as explicit orders or declarations. In personal and professional contexts, this principle translates into maintaining composure, confidence, and a measured approach. Leaders who project calm authority create an environment where their input is valued and anticipated. Their pauses and silences become moments of tension that draw attention and respect. Ultimately, letting fear do the talking before your words arrive is about creating an aura of power that precedes communication. It is the mastery of presence and reputation, turning psychological influence into a powerful prelude to persuasion. When others listen out of respect or fear, they are already halfway to acceptance, making your words more potent and your leadership more effective. Ambition is the fuel of progress and power, yet it is a double-edged sword when openly displayed. Ambition can provoke envy, resistance, and fear, making enemies out of potential allies. Machiavelli's principle to disguise ambition with humility offers a nuanced strategy to navigate this paradox. By cloaking your drive for advancement in modesty and restraint, you Reduce opposition, build trust, and position yourself to rise steadily without attracting unnecessary hostility. Disguising ambition means tempering overt displays of desire for status, wealth, or influence. Instead of loudly proclaiming your goals or aggressively pursuing them in a way that threatens others, you adopt a humble demeanor. This humility is not mere pretense. It is a calculated posture that invites others to underestimate you or see you as non-threatening. When people perceive you as modest, they are more likely to support you, or at least not oppose you actively. Humility softens your image. It humanizes you in the eyes of others, making you relatable and approachable. This helps in forming alliances and garnering loyalty because people prefer to follow leaders who seem grounded rather than arrogant. It also disarms critics who might otherwise label you as power-hungry or ruthless. By managing perception carefully, you create a protective shield around your ambitions. Moreover, humility as a disguise provides strategic flexibility. When others do not fully grasp the extent of your ambitions, you can maneuver more freely. You can build networks, accumulate resources, and strengthen your position quietly, avoiding premature confrontations or sabotage. This stealth approach increases your chances of success because you move under the radar until your power base is secure. Historical examples illustrate this well. Many great leaders advanced their causes by projecting humility or self-effacement while working tirelessly behind the scenes. They listened more than they spoke, gave credit to others, and avoided flashy displays of power. This approach allowed them to gain trust and influence incrementally, positioning themselves as indispensable before revealing their full capabilities. Disguised ambition also leverages psychological dynamics. People tend to support those who appear to have the group's best interests at heart rather than personal gain. Humility signals that your actions benefit the collective, even if your underlying motives are self-advancement. This perception encourages cooperation and reduces resistance. However, the balance is delicate. Excessive humility risks diminishing your authority or causing others to overlook your potential. The goal is to appear modest without seeming weak or indecisive. Your actions must still convey competence and confidence. The humility you project should invite trust while your capabilities command respect. Furthermore, this principle requires patience and discipline. Ambition often demands quick results, but disguised ambition relies on slow, steady progress. You must resist the temptation to reveal your desires prematurely or to assert yourself aggressively. Instead, cultivate relationships, demonstrate value, and let your influence grow organically. In modern contexts, this philosophy applies across leadership, politics, business, and personal development. Successful individuals often downplay their ambitions publicly, focusing on service and collaboration while privately advancing their goals. This subtlety enables them to navigate complex social landscapes effectively. Ultimately, disguising ambition with humility is a sophisticated strategy that reconciles desire for power with the realities of human psychology and social dynamics. It transforms ambition from a potential liability into a source of strength by managing perception and fostering trust. By blending modesty with determination, you create a path to influence that is both enduring and resilient, one where your rise is welcomed rather than feared.